Chapter 331. Stimulated by the two, the cloud flew extremely fast. Half a day passed in the blink of an eye. Except for Su Li, the fear and reluctance of Yang Chuanbua and others faded away, leaving only excitement and novelty. However, with the deterrence of the young man, they didn't dare to speak carelessly. Su Li glanced at the young man who was concentrating on flying, and her expression was indifferent. Before leaving, Huang took her hand and said a lot of things to her. "Girl, you have to remember that the cultivation sect is not a good place. When I was in Yushu sect, I saw many handyman disciples die violently, and even the official disciples of Ymen branch lived carefully for fear of losing their lives. After entering the sect, remember to be careful in everything, and don't act rashly to offend others. You are a sensible girl, alas." It could be seen that Huang was very worried about her, and there were many things he didn't tell her, but there was no time for him to nag. Su Li didn't promise Huang. Although going to Huajian's sect was within her control, everything in the world was variable. Even if she was reborn in the illusion, she couldn't protect herself, let alone now. After a while, Su Li raised her head and looked at the mountain not far below the cloud like Yang Chuanbua and others. There, she could vaguely see a sense of familiarity. The mountain gate of Huajian sect should be here. Sure enough, soon after, the young man and the woman controlled the magic weapons to descend at the same time. After passing through a cloud of miasma, a mountain surrounded by clouds and mist came into view, which was completely different from the frozen world outside. The mountain peaks were like spring all year round, with birds singing and fragrant flowers, like a paradise isolated from the world. Occasionally, white cranes could be seen flying up from the mountain peaks in a graceful posture, like a fairyland. Several children widened their eyes and exclaimed in surprise. "What a beautiful place! Is this the place where immortals live?" Yang Chuanbua opened his mouth wide. At a young age, he never thought that there would be such beautiful mountains and rivers in the world. Su Li also pretended to be inexperienced on the surface, but she was secretly awestruck. When she passed through the miasma just now, she clearly felt that the second layer of the mountain-guarding matrix of Huajian sect was opened. At that time, she was the holy girl of Yushu sect, relying not only on her strong cultivation and combat capability, but also on the realm of tactical matrix master. Hua Yan wanted to establish her own sect. As her best friend, she gave her the triple star-stacked mountain-guarding matrix as a congratulatory gift. As its name suggested, the matrix was divided into 3 layers. The first layer only activated the illusory array and the low-level defensive array, which could be maintained by consuming the lowest grade of low-grade spirit stones. The second layer activated the illusory array, defensive array, and a part of the killing array at the same time, which required the consumption of low-grade spirit stones. It could only be activated when the sect was in danger. As for the third layer, it needed precious upper-grade spiritual stones to increase the power of the tactical matrix. Huajian sect was a small sect. Not to mention upper-grade spiritual stones, even the reserves of middle-grade spiritual stones were not enough. If the third layer of the tactical matrix was really opened, Huajian sect would not be far from being destroyed. Now Huajian sect looked very peaceful, and they even had the leisure to go out to look for new disciples. Why would they open the second tactical matrix? Su Li's heart was full of doubts, but this question was obviously not what she could ask. She could only put it in her heart and explore it later. Not long after, the young man and the woman led Su Li and others to an open space on the top of a mountain. Someone on the mountain saw them and hurried over immediately. Taking advantage of this time, the young man explained, "There are 4 peaks in Huajian sect. Among them, Baihua Peak is the residence of the headmaster, and there are not many disciples there. Among the other 3 peaks, Fujian Peak and Danxia Peak are for the disciples of Naiman branch. All the disciples of Naiman branch stay in Qinghua Peak. This is Qinghua Peak." Then he looked at Su Li and said, "From now on, your name will be Su Yu." Su Li was slightly stunned. After thinking of the figure in the reincarnation mirror, she nodded. She didn't dislike this name. The real Su Yu should also live well in Qingshui Circle. If there was a chance in the future, she could see her. Hearing the young man's words, the woman smiled slightly and thought to herself, romantic, Hua, Shuiyue, senior fellow apprentice Han Feng has two maids named Hua and Shui respectively. That's probably how the word you came about. It's really casual. While they were talking, two middle-aged men in cyan standard robes had arrived quickly. Under the astonished gaze of Yang Chuanbua and others, they respectfully saluted to the young man and the woman, "Greetings, Senior Uncle Han and Senior Uncle Ruan." Han Feng nodded slightly and glanced at the surprised children, but didn't explain. He told the middle-aged man in cyan, "Take them to the testing stone, and I will come later." Then, Han Feng and the woman surnamed Ruan floated away under the envious gaze of the middle-aged man in cyan. After a long time, the middle-aged man in cyan, who looked older, withdrew his gaze and looked indifferent again. He said, "Come with me. You may have many questions in your mind, but it doesn't matter. As long as you stay in the sect for a while, you will understand everything. Now, come with me." Hearing this, Yang Chuanbua and others didn't dare to act rashly and hurriedly followed him. Su Li deliberately fell behind and walked at the end. Walking to a spacious square on the mountainside, the two middle-aged men in cyan stopped. Yang Chuanbua and others were surprised to find that there were no less than 100 children in addition to them at this moment. Their ages ranged from 10 to 16 years old. Many of them were very well dressed, and it was obvious that they were of noble birth. After the middle-aged man in cyan sent them here, he left. Without the discipline of adults, the children immediately chatted in groups of 3 or 4. Su. Sister Suyu, do you know what the spirit testing stone is? Yang Chuanbo was so shocked that he broke into a cold sweat and almost spilled the beans. The other two boys' faces were pale. They were so scared that they didn't even dare to speak. Such a big scene had already exceeded the scope of what they could accept. Su Li shook her head and didn't speak. Yang Chuanbo just thought that she was also nervous, so he could only helplessly wait aside. Su Li looked at the black and lustrous square stone tablet in the square, which was as tall as a person. This was the testing stone, a low-level magic treasure specially used to test the spiritual root. At most, it could test the middle-grade spiritual root. The mountain gate occupied by Huajian's sect was not full of nimbus. It would be lucky if there could be a disciple with a complete spiritual root in the surrounding area. Probably, they never thought that they could test the middle-grade spiritual root. As for the principle of the testing stone, it was very simple. As long as there was spiritual power in the body to resonate with it, it could distinguish the strength of the spiritual root according to the degree of resonance. There was no nimbus in the body of mortals, so they could only rely on the spiritual root to resonate. This was also the simplest and fastest way for many sects to select disciples from the secular world. Thinking of this, Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. She had reached the third hurdle of Lianqi realm now, and there was a spiritual power whirlpool in her body. As long as she wanted, she could even imitate the resonance of the supergrade spiritual root. What's more, she was a body of evil ghost, and even natural law would be afraid of her talent. The low-level method of testing the spiritual root was not suitable for her at all. Now, the only thing that made her feel embarrassed was to what degree of spiritual root to expose. It was true that she could make herself one of the inconspicuous handymen of Huajian's sect without triggering the testing stone at all. But if she wanted to recover as soon as possible, she must need practicing resources. Only by becoming an official disciple could she have the opportunity to get practicing resources. Moreover, handyman disciples had no human rights in the sect, and no one would care if they were killed at will. Even if she wanted to recultivate quietly, it would be very difficult. Suddenly, there was a commotion among the children. Su Li looked in the direction of the loudest voice. It turned out that there were two more children, a boy and a girl, who were dressed in well-tailored golden clothes. They behaved with nobility, as if they were princes and princesses from the royal family, which made all the other children present feel ashamed. The boy in golden clothes looked proud and glanced at the audience. There was a sneer on his childish and fair face. He was different from these lowly and poor people, but his father asked him to test the spiritual root in the same place with this group of garbage. It was disgusting. Alright, I'll see you off here. Don't let me down. The woman who brought her tongue said indifferently, and the boy in golden clothes restrained his arrogance and saluted, "Thank you, First Senior Sister Apprentice." First Senior Sister Apprentice. Hearing this title, the woman slightly twitched the corner of her mouth. She didn't say anything and turned away. Shortly after she left, many children suddenly surrounded the boy in golden clothes. Forming cliques in order to survive was something that started from the moment they entered the sect. Shall we go there too? In the small group of Tieha village, one of the two boys couldn't help but ask. Suli vaguely remembered that his name was Chen Hu. The other boy, Wang Xiai, immediately looked at Yang Chuanbua. Yang Chuanbua hesitated and glanced at Suli, who was unmoved. In the end, he sighed and didn't take any action. "If you don't go, I will." Chen Hu looked at the golden-robed boy, and yearning flashed in his eyes. He then tugged at Wang Xiai, who was beside him. Wang Xiai looked like he was in a difficult position, but when he saw more and more people around the golden-robed boy, he couldn't help but leave with Chen Hu. Yang Chuanbo was slightly anxious, but because he couldn't let go of Suli, he didn't follow them. Suli sighed secretly. For the sake of the ring of reincarnation mirror, she said, "Wait a little longer. It's too early to choose now." Hearing Suli's words, Yang Chuanbua suddenly froze, and immediately looked at Suli with confusion and doubt. Sister Arya seemed to be a little different, but he had too little knowledge. Except for the word different, he couldn't say a specific word to describe it. He just felt that he should listen to Suli. At this moment, a loud shout suddenly burst over the field, like a thunder. "What are you doing?" A group of children crowded together were immediately frightened and in a mess. Many children were trampled and injured. Chapter 332. When the green-robed stewards heard this, their expressions changed. Without saying a word, they rushed down to save several severely injured children who were about to be trampled to death. Among them was Chen Hu. At this moment, his face was covered in blood and he was crying loudly. Even if he could survive, his face would be disfigured. Wang Xiai was also slightly injured, but he was much better than Chen Hu. Yang Chuanbua looked at this scene with lingering fear. Fortunately, he listened to Suli and didn't go over. Otherwise, he would probably end up like Chen Hu. Thinking of this, he subconsciously glanced at Suli beside him, but found that the latter saw such a bloody scene without any change of expression on her face. Yang Chuanbua became more and more confused. Was this still the sister Suli he knew before, who didn't even dare to kill a chicken? Right at this moment, the black-robed old man finally descended from the sky. With a sweep of his sharp gaze, all the children were immediately intimidated, and in an instant, there was absolute silence. The elder coughed slightly and said loudly, "Little kids, I am the elder of Ymen branch. I am responsible for testing your spiritual roots. Now come over and line up for the test one by one. Inku, watch carefully. If anyone dares to make a ruckus, kick him out of the sect." "Yes." The middle-aged man in cyan clothes who had brought Suli and others to the open space stepped forward and responded. Then he arranged the line in an orderly manner with many stewards behind him. Yang Chuanbua and Suli lined up in the middle. Suli looked around the line and saw at a glance that the boy in gold clothes was at the front of the line. But at this moment, the boy in gold clothes was a little disheveled and looked quite embarrassed. He was almost injured in the chaos just now. On the contrary, the girl in gold clothes was still the same. Her eyes were timid and she didn't have the arrogance of the boy in gold clothes. The black-clothed elder walked to the front of the stone tablet and pressed his palm on the stone surface. The whole stone surface suddenly lit up slightly and then dimmed down. Seeing this, he nodded and turned back indifferently. "The first one, come to my side." The boy in gold clothes looked a little respectful, but not nervous. The royal family he was born in had some connection with cultivation, so it was not difficult to find a low-grade spiritual stone for testing in advance. Place your hand on the stone tablet, empty your mind, and feel it with all your heart. Under the guidance of the black-robed elder, the golden-robed boy gradually relaxed. At the same time, the stone's surface glowed with a golden luster. Although it was very dim and could not be seen without careful observation, the black-robed elder's face quickly softened. 60% gold spirit root, not bad, it's enough to become an inner disciple of our sect. What's your name? The golden-robed boy was delighted when he heard the words. He quickly bowed and said respectfully, Elder, my name is Jin Wei. The old man in black nodded and said with a faint smile, there is a good seedling in this generation of the Jincheng royal family. Jin Wei heard the praise from the elder of the Immortal Gate, and he became complacent for a moment. The arrogance that he had restrained just now appeared again. He stood beside the steward who passed the test and looked at the children who were still queuing up. His nose was almost up to the sky. The second one was Jin Wei's sister, Jin Ning. Obviously, her status in the royal family was not very high, and she had not tested her spiritual root in advance. Her little face looked quite perturbed. She could come with Jin Wei this time because Jin Wei liked her very much. According to the black-robed elder's words, a layer of golden light immediately lit up when she put her tender palm on it. The brightness was even higher than that of Jin Wei, 80% gold spirit root, good. The black-robed elder's eyes brightened, and he said, good, 3 times in a row. He looked at Jining as if he had found a treasure and said, little girl, what's your name? His tone was obviously softer than when he talked to Jin Wei before. My name is Jining. Jining said timidly, but her big bright eyes could not hide her joy. She was not a fool. Although she did not understand what 80% gold spirit root meant, one thing was certain, that her future in Huajian's sect was bound to be more brilliant than that of her royal brother. Jin Ing. Good name. Ing, stay by my side. The black-robed elder gently told her, and then turned to a steward and ordered, inform the mount heads quickly. The black-robed elder calculated in his heart. An 80% gold spirit root was enough to cause the inner elders to fight for it. Qinghua Mount was called Ymen Mount because there were too few geniuses in the younger generation. Decades ago, Ymen Mount belonged to Li Guang's Fujian Mount. But unexpectedly, the old guy was so lucky that he received a child with immortal latency with acquired body of sword. Now the disciple had entered Yushu's sect and was not in Huajian's sect, but as long as the person was still alive, Fujian Mount would not fall into Ymen Mount. This experience naturally made the mount heads of Huajian's sect begin to pay attention to the children with immortal latency. As long as there was a good seedling among the children, it would inevitably cause a fierce competition. At the same time as the black-robed elder gave the order, several disciples of Ymen branch who were watching from the periphery also quietly retreated, and it seemed that they left for the other 2 mount gates. Okay, continue the test. The black-robed elder calmed down and finally remembered that the spirit test had just begun, so he began to restore the order. However, elite disciples like Jincheng royal family were rare after all. Then dozens of children's palms pressed on the testing stone, but there was no reaction at all. Without the spiritual root, there were only 2 ways out. One was to continue to stay in Ymen Mount as a handyman disciple to seek a glimmer of immortal latency. The other was to go down the mountain and go home to be an honest mortal. But if they didn't know, it would be fine. These children had come to Huajian sect, a land of immortals, and saw the flying immortals. How could they be willing to go back to the original place and continue to live their lives facing the yellow soil? Therefore, all the children who had not been tested with the spiritual root chose to start as a handyman disciple on Qinghua Mount, just like Huang in the past. They still had a glimmer of luck in their hearts. The black-robed elder was disappointed again, and soon gave up the idea of testing in person. He asked the steward to take over, and he sat aside with Jining to get closer to them. Jin Wei, who stood alone on the side, was very embarrassed. Who could have thought that his sister, whom he brought as a concubine casually, had a better talent than him? When he thought that he could not have Jining as his own in the future, and it was very likely that he would have to compete with others for Jin Ying's heart, he felt sick in his heart. In the blink of an eye, the test team had gone halfway. Su Li suddenly raised her head to look at the sky, and then quickly lowered her head. No one saw this scene except Yang Chuanbua, who had been paying attention to her. He looked up at the blue sky and was about to ask Su Li what she was looking at. Suddenly, whoosh! Whoosh! Gusts of violent wind blew from the sky, and the team of children suddenly swayed. Yang Chuanbua was the first to bear the brunt of the wind. He was blown to tears and couldn't open his eyes. After the wind dissipated, 3 figures suddenly appeared in the field. When the black-robed elder saw them, he complained in his heart. Why did these 3 come together? While thinking, he quickly stepped forward and saluted, Senior Fellow Apprentice Li, Senior Sister Apprentice Wang, Mount Head. The middle-aged Taoist, who stood on the leftmost and was called Mount Head by the elder, snorted when he heard the words. Only when he saw the little girl, Jining, who was held by him, did he look better. He turned to the other 2 and said, Junior Fellow Apprentices and Junior Sister Apprentices, it's not easy for Qinghua Mount to have such an outstanding talent. Don't compete with me, okay? The middle-aged Taoist was Yuan Shu, the Mount Head of Qinghua Mount. Among the other 2, the thin one in a black robe and carrying a long sword was Han Feng's master, the Mount Head of Fu Zhenfeng, who discovered the genius with acquired body of sword. Li Guang. And the other female practitioner in a light black dress was Wang Yu, the Mount Head of Danxia Mount. Wang Yu looked at Jining, who was as beautiful as a porcelain doll, with a smile and retorted, Senior Fellow Apprentice, you are wrong. Jining is a girl, and it's a little inconvenient for her to follow you. Besides, there are few female disciples on Qinghua Mount. If she doesn't come to Danxia Mount, she will be ruined by you. If you really want this girl, you'd better take her back. I will teach her personally and cultivate her to be a talent. Yuan Shu scolded her for being cunning in his heart, but he still smiled and shook his head, impossible. There are many female disciples on Qinghua Mount, and male disciples can also thrive. Junior Sister Apprentice, don't talk about the difference between men and women. At worst, I will throw away my dignity and send her to the main peak. The smile on Wang Yu's face immediately disappeared. This old fox really refused to suffer losses, but she was not so easily persuaded. She turned to look at Jining, who looked innocent. I think it's up to this girl to decide which peak to go to. What do you think, Senior Fellow Apprentice? Yuan Shu was slightly stunned and didn't know what Wang Yu was planning. But when he thought that his junior fellow apprentice and Jining had been intimate for a long time, he was about to agree. At this moment, the steward suddenly exclaimed. The spiritual testing stone suddenly emitted a very strong blue light, which was even more intense than Jin Ying's. Everyone's attention was attracted, and then their eyes fell on Yang Chuanbua, who was standing beside the stone tablet and at a loss. A complete spiritual root. The 3 Mount Heads reacted and were overjoyed. They flashed to Yang Chuanbua's side. What's your name? Li Guang restrained his temper and squeezed out a gentle smile on his face, which had never been smiling. Han Feng, who came with Li Guang, saw this scene and hurriedly stepped forward, saying, Master, his name is Yang Chuanbua, and I brought him up the mountain. Yang Chuanbua, a young man born in a barbarian land, had a complete water spiritual root. Han Feng was pleasantly surprised. This was a complete surprise. In this way, he would definitely get a large reward from his master, and he would also form a good relationship with Yang Chuanbua. My name is Han Feng, and you have to call me first senior fellow apprentice in the future. Looking at Yang Chuanbua, who was confused, the young man said his name with a smile, but he didn't even look at Su Li, who was favored by him before. Yang, would you like to practice with me? Li Guang couldn't wait to ask. Yuan Shu and Wang Yu changed their expressions and immediately stepped forward to stop him, junior fellow apprentice. Chapter 333. For a time, the three high-ranking practitioners of Jindan realm argued endlessly for Yang Chuanbua in front of many disciples. It seemed that they would not stop for an hour. The steward of Ymen branch and the disciples of each peak all showed envy or jealousy. Unsurprisingly, the most dazzling one among this group of children with immortal latency was Yang Chuanbua. At least in 10 years, Yang Chuanbua would receive the highest level of training in the sect. Maybe it would not take 10 years for him to cross Lianqi realm from immortal and step into Zhuji realm in one fell swoop. Different people have different fates. The steward in charge of testing the spiritual root sighed and waved to Su Li, who was standing in the next position, indicating her to come to test the spiritual root. Su Li withdrew her gaze from Yang Chuanbua and calmed herself down. Then she walked to the testing stone. She was a little surprised that Yang Chuanbua had cultivation talent. However, when she thought that Yang Chuanbua could pick up the parts of the reincarnation mirror in the Taishui River, which was almost dried up, Su Li felt that everything was reasonable. Yang Chuanbua's cultivation luck seemed to be very good. While thinking, the steward had asked her to put her little hand on the testing stone. As soon as she touched it, a cold breath immediately penetrated into her body from Su Li's palm. It traveled in the meridians and pubic region, looking for the spiritual root that resonated with it. Su Li's eyes narrowed slightly. She separated a wisp of her spiritual power and condensed it into a silk thread. Then she split it into 1/10 of the thickness. After hesitating for a moment, she separated 1/10 of the silk thread and collided with that wisp of breath. The steward stared at the testing stone. Seeing that there was no response for a long time, he was about to impatiently drive Su Li to the side that failed. Suddenly, a red halo burst out of the testing stone. Although it was not a complete spiritual root, judging from the brightness, it had clearly surpassed 60% spiritual root and reached 70%. The quality of children with immortal latency this year seemed to be surprisingly high. The steward was stunned. Although he did not understand why the reaction of the testing stone became slow, it did not prevent him from showing a flattering expression and sending Su Li to the 3 peak heads. This little girl's talent was even higher than Jin Ying's. She was ranked second in this batch of children with immortal latent chance. She would definitely be taken in by the peak masters. Good. I didn't expect that among this batch of children with immortal latent chance, there are 4 good seedlings with spiritual roots of more than 50%, and this kid. Li Guang looked at the 4 ignorant children and a look of joy flashed across his face. He was really happy for the sect. All these years, senior sister sect leader had really put in a lot of effort to strengthen the sect. Even her cultivation was affected. Otherwise, how could... Thinking of this, Li Guang's face was slightly gloomy. Although it soon disappeared, it still did not escape Su Li's eyes. It seems that Huajian's sect is really in trouble. She lowered her head and stood obediently beside Jining, and a thoughtful look flashed in her eyes. The 70% spiritual root was a complete accident. Before her battle prowess reached the level of her previous life, she didn't want to enter the line of sight of any gold core stage cultivator. But the heavens did not go according to one's wishes. After her rebirth, although she understood the power of the body of evil ghost, she had no idea how powerful it was. She only wanted to show 50% or even less of the spiritual root, but she didn't expect that the spiritual power reduced by 1% still made the testing stone resonate with 70%. It should be known that when she was the holy girl of Yushu sect, she was a peerless talent with 120% celestial spiritual root. But if she reduced her spiritual power to 1% in the 3rd hurdle of Lianqi realm to resonate with the testing stone, she might not even be able to test 20% of the spiritual root. Was her talent 7 times that of the original after her rebirth in this life? Thinking of this, Su Li frowned. 7 times the talent of the celestial spiritual root could at best reach the level of the inborn Taoist body, which was the top talent in the cultivation circle. However, the inborn Taoist body would not be regarded as a thorn by natural law. If the body of evil ghost was at the same level as the inborn Taoist body, then she would suffer a great loss. Jining, standing beside Su Li, looked curiously at Su Li, who looked a little dull, and was secretly perturbed. It seemed that this younger sister was not easy to get along with. In the blink of an eye, the sun went down. The spiritual root test that lasted for a day also came to an end. After Suli, no one could reach more than 50% of the spiritual root. The debate among the three mount heads finally ended after the headmaster sent the specific arrangement. Yang Chuanbo finally joined Li Guang's Fujian Mount. Su Li and Jining both joined Danxia Mount's Wang Yu. Jin Wei, who had the worst talent among the four, became Yuan Shu's disciple. Both Li Guang and Wang Yu were very satisfied with the result. On the other hand, Yuan Shu's old face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. Jin Wei, who followed him, kept silent, but he was mad with depression and hatred. It shouldn't be like this. I am the first genius of Jincheng dynasty. There must be something wrong. Why could the poor boy and the two cheap maids enter the Naiman Mount to practice, but he ended up in the worst Naiman Mount? The huge gap made Jin Qing extremely aggrieved, and he hated Su Li, the three of them, and the whole sect. The headmaster is too partial. I must ask for an explanation. Yuan Shu snorted coldly and left without taking Jin Wei with him. In the end, the black-clothed elder took him away from the spiritual testing site. Let's go back. Seeing the angry figure disappear, Wang Yufeng's eyes were slightly cold. She held Su Li and Jining in her hands and flew away with a smile. Master, Su. Sister Su, you and I are from the same village. Yang Chuanbo watched Su Li disappear in the sky and said reluctantly. Li Guang couldn't help laughing and touched the former's forehead with a kind face. Silly boy, when you step into Zhuji realm, you can fly on the flying sword. You can go to Danxia Mount at that time. Practice hard. Yang Chuanbo's eyes suddenly lit up, full of fighting spirit. He thought in his heart, Sister Su Li, I must become a practitioner in Zhuji realm as soon as possible, so that I can continue to protect you. Li Guang was old and shrewd. He knew what Yang Chuanbo was thinking at a glance and nodded slightly. He was a person who valued friendship and righteousness. As long as he cultivated the relationship well, he would not be an ungrateful person. But Su Yu. She only had a spiritual root of 70%. Although they fought fiercely for her, she couldn't even enter the sect with such qualifications hundreds of years ago. Without a complete spiritual root, the limit of this life was doomed. It was impossible to break through Zhuji realm and step into Jindan realm. As long as there was no accident, Yang Chuanbo would definitely become a master of Jindan realm. At that time, after Yang Chuanbo met the talented girls of the same generation as him, Li Guang shook his head slightly. Of course, he would not tell these things to Yang Chuanbo. If he told Yang Chuanbo now, it would only cause the new disciples disgust. When Yang Chuanbo noticed the gap between him and Su Yu in the future, he would give him a little advice. After Su Li and Jining were brought to Danxia Mount by Wang Yu, they were settled down by the steward of the sect, and each received a set of the standard dress of the fourth-generation disciples of Qinghua Mount. The fourth-generation disciples were the general term for disciples in Yunti realm who had not yet stepped into Lianqi realm. To put it bluntly, the 10th hurdle of Yunti realm was to strengthen the physique and prepare to open the cyclone in the pubic region. It was also the limit that the handyman disciples without spiritual root could reach. Of course, the division of the fourth-generation disciples like Su Li and Jining was only temporary. For example, the small room in front of them. Su Li stood at the door for a moment, glanced at the empty room around her, and pushed the door in. The layout of the room was not exquisite, but it was clean and belonged to her alone. The steward who sent her here said that only disciples who had reached the 5th hurdle of Lianqi realm could have a separate room. If they could reach Zhuji realm and become one of the inherited disciples, they could move to a separate courtyard and recruit 2 handyman disciples as servants. They didn't have to do ordinary trifles in person to disturb their practice. In this way, it's convenient for me to restore my cultivation. Sitting on the edge of the bed and touching the soft mattress, this thought flashed through Su Li's mind. There must be gains and losses. Putting aside the distracting thoughts, Su Li got up and opened the package on the table. There were 2 sets of clothes and a token in it. Su Li's expression changed slightly. The Jinling mask in the secular world. Although this kind of precious light pink satin had no protective effect, it could be sold for hundreds of gold ingots in the secular world. The token was not simple either. It was made of special cyan spiritual wood and contained a one-time protective tactical matrix. It was very valuable. It seemed that Wang Yu was really ready to cultivate her and Jining carefully. Su Li's eyes showed a hint of contemplation. When she was brought to Danxia Mount by Wang Yu, she tried her best to shrink the spiritual power in her body. Relying on the natural concealment of the evil ghost, Wang Yu didn't find the abnormality. I can't see anything in Jindan realm. It seems that I won't be in too much danger as long as the Yuanying realm and Huajian sect doesn't come out. Su Li was slightly relieved. She put on the light pink disciple clothes, hung the token, and pushed the door to go out. But at the same time, a person happened to come out of the room next door. It was Jining, who had also changed clothes. Seeing Su Li, Jin Ying's eyes brightened slightly, as if she had found the backbone. She hurriedly approached Su Li, but felt it was inappropriate when she approached Su Li. She stopped and stammered after a long while, Su Yu, let's go to the book pavilion together. I am a little scared. Jining felt a little embarrassed after saying that. She was 1 year older than Su Li. She raised her head and thought that Su Li would laugh at her, but Su Li's expression didn't change at all. She just nodded and said lightly, let's go together. Jining was delighted when she heard the words. She took 2 steps forward and held Su Li's arm. Su Li frowned, and finally shook her head slightly and let her go. The book pavilion was in the palace group near the top of the mountain, several miles away from the residence of Su Li and Jining. Jining shrank beside Su Li, and did not forget to quietly look at the many disciples in different clothes who passed by them, as well as the tall pavilions that she had never seen before. Finally, her eyes returned to Su Li, whose expression didn't change much. Although she felt that Su Li was born indifferent, it still made her feel safe. It seemed that as long as she was on Su Li's side, nothing would happen even if the sky fell down. More than an hour later, the 2 finally came to the book pavilion. Jining was panting. Although Su Li didn't consume much energy, she still needed to pretend. Chapter 334. Get out of the way. A low roar mixed with anger came along with the wind, and it was about to hit Jining, who had a look of horror on her face. At this moment, the gatekeeper disciple saw that Su Li was tripped by something in a panic. She pulled Jining to the side and just escaped the sharp wind. Lucky girl. The gatekeeper disciple breathed a sigh of relief. If she didn't fall like this, she would have to lie in bed for at least 2 months, although she wouldn't die from the impact of the wind. Thinking of this, he watched the young man in white rush into the pavilion with horror. Until he couldn't see the back of the young man, he breathed a sigh of relief. He walked over to pull up Su Li and Jining, who fell on the ground, and persuaded, you 2 are unfamiliar. You should be new to the sect, right? Jining rubbed her knees and burst into tears. Hearing the gatekeeper disciple's question, she nodded obediently and said in a clear voice, Senior fellow apprentice, my name is Jining. I just joined the sect with junior sister apprentice Su Yu today. It turns out that you are the 2 girls. No wonder. The gatekeeper disciple suddenly realized. Then he looked around carefully. After confirming that there were no other disciples, he bent down and whispered, Junior sister apprentices, listen to me. Come to the book pavilion tomorrow. The senior fellow apprentice who just passed by, has a bad temper. If you annoy him, it will not be a good thing. Jining, who was a little scared, was even more scared after hearing this. She pulled Su Li's sleeve and whispered, Junior sister apprentice, let's go. The disciple guarding the door was confused. Why was it that out of these 2 girls, the younger junior sister was the one making the decisions? Su Li was not interested in the practice methods in the book pavilion. She came here just to know what happened in Qingshui Circle in the past 1,000 years. This matter was not urgent, and the book pavilion could not fly. It was the same to come back after she practiced for 2 days. Let's go. After Suli said this, she inadvertently glanced at the position of the windowsill on the second floor of the book pavilion, and then turned to leave. Jining quickly followed her. When they walked far away, the disciple guarding the door put away the friendliness on his face and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, with the help of senior brother Deng, the task assigned by senior sister was finally completed. At the same time, the white-clothed young man standing by the window-sill on the second floor couldn't help but sneer when he saw this scene, and he muttered to himself in a low voice, "So it's because of these 2 little girls. Junior sister, you're really becoming more and more backward as you live. You even dare to do such a despicable thing. Fine. That way, I won't have to worry too much about competing for rankings in the future." With this thought in mind, the white-clothed young man withdrew his gaze. Suddenly, his eyebrows knitted together. Just now, one of the 2 little girls with a lotus mark on her face seemed to have glanced in his direction. Could it be that she had sensed him? Impossible. The white-robed young man shook his head, wondering why he would have such a strange thought. Could it be that talking to junior sister you would make one stupid? When they returned to their residence, it was almost noon. Jining touched her shriveled belly with a look of grievance. She whispered, "Junior sister apprentice Su, what should we do? Yesterday, the steward clearly asked us to go to the book pavilion to copy the mental methods of Yunti realm, but I didn't expect." Suli glanced at her and shook her head, "We'll go tomorrow. You go to eat first." Jining nodded and was thinking about what to eat with Suli. Suddenly, she saw that Suli turned around and walked to her room. She couldn't help but ask in confusion, "Junior sister apprentice Su, where are you going?" Suli paused slightly and said without looking back, "I'm not hungry. You go alone." After that, before Jining could say anything, she had entered the room and closed the door, leaving Jining standing alone outside and at a loss. Back in the room, Suli walked to the futon and sat down. She breathed a long sigh of relief. Wang Yu had been on the mountain last night. For the sake of safety, she didn't practice. Until she sensed that Wang Yu had left this morning and dealt with the matter of the book pavilion, she had time to restore her cultivation. Suli lifted her sleeve and glanced at the seemingly ordinary quaint ring on her wrist. "As my cultivation improves, the effect of reincarnation mirror to shield the mysteries of heaven is getting worse and worse. It seems that I have to arrange the tactical matrix for deception as soon as possible." Thinking of this, Suli frowned. Setting up the tactical matrix was not a long-term solution. She couldn't stay in a fixed place all the time. She must find a magic weapon to shield the mysteries of heaven and carry it with her at all times in order to be at ease. But, the magic weapon to shield the mysteries of heaven was so precious that it couldn't be bought in the cultivation market. The only feasible way in front of her now was to repair the ring of reincarnation mirror and improve its ability to shield the mysteries of heaven. "My cultivation is not even enough to arrange the tactical matrix for deception, let alone reincarnation mirror." Suli smiled bitterly, shook her head to get rid of the distractions, and entered the state of meditation. To arrange the tactical matrix for deception, ordinary practitioners could barely arrange it at least at the 7th hurdle of Lianqi realm. Even with her tactical matrix realm, she needed to reach the 5th hurdle of Lianqi realm. Now her cultivation was at the peak of the 3rd hurdle of Lianqi realm, 2 hurdles away. While Wang Yu was not in Danxia Mount, she needed to seize every minute and second, and she didn't bother to think about other trivial things. After a long time, Suli, who was sitting on the bed, burst out the momentum of the 4th hurdle of Lianqi realm. The black spiritual power that escaped was all retracted into her body in less than 3 breaths, and the room became calm again. After a few breaths, Su Li's long eyelashes fluttered, and she opened her eyes. "Finally, I broke through to the 4th hurdle of Lianqi realm. The speed is faster than I expected. At this speed, I can make another breakthrough and reach the 5th hurdle in 10 days. Murmuring, Su Li pinched her fingers and found that only half a day had passed. She looked at the dark night outside and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, she pinched a strange black mark with one hand and spread it all over her body from her fingers, completely sealing the pneuma that had been restrained to the extreme to prevent the leakage of the pneuma that had just broken through from causing trouble. After doing this, Suli jumped out of bed and put on her clothes. She pushed the door open and was about to go out to inquire about the news. Suddenly, she saw Jining squatting on the wall beside the door and sleeping. She frowned. Why did Jining sleep in front of her door instead of her own room? Jining hadn't started practicing yet, so Suli didn't worry that the movement in the room would be noticed by the woman. But the woman's character was too weak. If she didn't change her character, she would die on the road of cultivation sooner or later. But what did the life and death of others have to do with her? Suli's eyes were indifferent. The warm-hearted people had already died in the cultivation circle. Perhaps the sound of opening the door was a little loud, and Jining was woken up. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked up to see Suli. She immediately stood up in a panic and waved her hand. I didn't mean to sleep here, Before she finished her words, Jining's stomach growled untimely, which was heard by Suli. Her face suddenly turned red, and tears appeared in the corners of her eyes. Jining, you are so useless. You don't even dare to go to the dining room alone. It's better to starve to death. Jining thought in despair. She raised her head and was about to explain to Suli, but Suli was not in front of her. She was stunned for a moment and saw that Suli had gone far away, in the direction of the dining room. Her eyes suddenly brightened and she quickly followed up. Hearing the footsteps behind her, Suli's expression did not change. She was indeed going to the dining room. At this time, there were the most handyman disciples in the dining room. It was very convenient to use Jining as a cover to inquire about the news. After a while, the two came to the dining room. At this time, it was the time when the handyman disciples finished a day's work and came to eat the spiritual food. The huge three-story pavilion was so noisy that it could be heard clearly outside. Suli walked to the door without stopping and stepped in. The noise in the big hall immediately quieted down slightly. In the place where all the handyman disciples in gray clothes gathered, two girls in delicate pink clothes suddenly came in, which was really eye-catching. Being stared at by so many people, Jining suddenly flashed a panic in her eyes and hid behind Suli. On the other hand, Suli glanced at the audience indifferently and walked directly through the crowd to the spiritual chef to take 2 portions of spiritual food. After stuffing one into Jining's hand, she found an empty seat and sat down. Jining followed and sat down. Looking at the spiritual food on the plate which did not look very good, she swallowed her saliva and couldn't wait to start eating. She was so hungry. Suli didn't go out at noon, so she didn't dare to come to eat alone. In addition, she didn't sleep last night. She was tired and sleepy, so she fell asleep soon after sitting in front of Suli's door. After others saw the two sitting down to eat, the noise in the hall became noisy again, but it was much smaller than before. Many handyman disciples looked at Suli and Jining with respect and desire in their eyes. Anyone who stayed in Danxia Mount for more than 10 years knew what pink clothes meant. The boy who was valued by the Mount head must have a good cultivation talent. In a few years, these two girls would become disciples of the Naiman branch, or even inherited disciples. If they could build a good relationship with them, they might be able to make a meteoric rise and become their servants after they became inherited disciples. The status and power of the servants of inherited disciples of the Naiman branch were terrifying. Even ordinary disciples of the Naiman branch were not willing to offend them. Suli picked up a plump, round, soybean-sized rice grain and put it into her mouth. A fragrance with sweetness spread in her mouth. She hadn't eaten spiritual grain for a long time. Thinking of the time when she practiced in Yushu sect, Suli was slightly nostalgic, but Jining was eating spiritual grain and didn't see it. Junior sister apprentice Su, what kind of rice is this? It's so delicious. I have never eaten such delicious rice. Jinying's eyes were bright. She said vaguely while eating. Suddenly there was a sneer from the next table, you don't even know spiritual grain. I really don't know how you got into Danxia Mount. Hearing such sarcasm, Jean Ying's face turned pale. She looked at Su Li with embarrassment and a little guilt in her eyes. If she didn't follow them to eat, junior sister apprentice Su Yu wouldn't be laughed at. Chapter 335. Su Li withdrew her gaze. That was the token of the personal maid of inherited disciples. No wonder she dared to be presumptuous in front of them. The leading girl saw Su Li's cowardly reaction, and immediately mocked, "You are really a little girl who has never seen the world. You don't stay at home to take care of your husband and children, but you also want to be an immortal? Be careful that no one will collect your corpse after you die." Jean Ying grew up in the palace. Although she was not favored, she had never heard such outrageous words. Her little face immediately turned red with anger, and she couldn't help but stand up and scold, "That's too much. You, curse people to death. How did my junior sister apprentice and I offend you?" Although what she said was reasonable, Jean Ying's voice was too low, and her weak expression made her look neither fish nor fowl. Seeing this, the four maids all trembled with laughter, which attracted the attention of the surrounding handymen, and then they looked away with fear. Although Su Li and Jean Ying were full of potential and were likely to become inherited disciples in the future, or even reach a higher level, it was only a possibility. These four maids were notoriously bad in Danxia Mount. They were lucky enough to become the personal servants of inherited disciples. Even if they killed one or two disciples of Ymen branch with no potential, their master would cover it up. At present, although the four maids bullied the boy valued by the Mount head, they just verbally abused him, didn't hit him, and didn't endanger his life. They could do whatever they wanted. The harsh laughter kept ringing in her ears. Jean Ying was so angry that her whole body trembled slightly. She showed an indignant expression and was about to continue to argue. The leading maid with the silver token laughed enough. Seeing Jean Ying's reaction, her eyes suddenly became fierce and she snorted, "Offend? I'm just telling the truth. Junior sister apprentice, you haven't officially practiced, and you have already begun to lecture your senior sister apprentice? Do you really think that being favored by the Mount head, you can command us handyman disciples and blame us at will?" Jean Ying was so anxious that her face turned red. She bit her lip and shook her head, "I didn't." "It's you, shut up." The maid with a silver token looked gloomy. She was young, but her expression was somewhat frightening. "Your senior sister apprentice is talking. You have no right to interrupt." As she said, she looked at Su Li, who was still eating silently and did not refute. She smiled and said, "Learn from your junior sister apprentice. Sometimes it is not bad to be a coward." As she said this, she came close and pressed hard on Jean Ying's head. Jean Ying, who had not cultivated yet, was certainly not her opponent. She cried out in pain and almost knelt on the ground. "This time, seeing that you're new to the sect, I'll let it go." The etiquette of the sect cannot be ignored. When you see me in the future, remember to respectfully call me senior sister. This is the first lesson I'm teaching you, no need to thank me. As she spoke, the maidservant with the silver token began to laugh, and the three maidservants behind her laughed even more wantonly. Under the terrified gazes of the many janitor disciples, they swaggered off. Jean Ying stood there blankly. Even if she did not kneel down, she felt that her self-esteem had been destroyed, and tears fell down. "Come and eat." But at this moment, Su Li's slightly cold voice came. Jean Ying turned her eyes blankly and saw Su Li's calm face. The air stagnated for a moment, and Jean Ying gritted her teeth and left angrily. Although she was timid, she disdained to be associated with Su Yu, who compromised and abandoned her dignity. Su Li was slightly stunned, and then shook her head. She bowed her head and continued to eat. She didn't have the leisure to waste time on buzzing flies. It was good for Jean Ying to suffer more, so that she wouldn't stick to her all day long. After the storm passed, the lobby gradually resumed its hustle and bustle. Su Li concentrated her spiritual power on her ears, and all the whispers were clearly heard. Although many people were talking about what had happened just now, Suli still got a lot of useful information after eliminating all the useless conversations. After confirming that there was no other useful information, she put down the bowl and chopsticks and left, ignoring the pity and disdain of other janitor disciples. Back to the wooden house, Suli glanced at the closed wooden door next door, and then pushed the door into the room. Today, Wang Yu's Numa was not on the top of the mountain, and she had not returned. She could practice well tonight. However, she didn't rush to practice when she returned to the bed. Instead, she took out a thumb-sized square stone in the heavy bag. Under the dim candlelight, the stone emitted a faint white light. This was the inferior spiritual stone. Janitor disciples could receive one inferior spiritual stone every month, which could speed up the practice of Yunti realm and Lianqi realm. But for Suli, it was of little use. The quality of the black spiritual power produced by the secret records of Black Lotus that she practiced was too high. The spiritual power extracted from an inferior spiritual stone was purified by the secret records of Black Lotus. She estimated that only the low-grade spiritual stone could work for her. However, I can make it into a low-rank array talisman and sell it for some low-rank spiritual stones. It's just that with my current status, if I sell it once, it'll be fine. If I sell it multiple times, I'll definitely be targeted. Suli frowned. She wanted to restore her cultivation as soon as possible, and the only easy way at present was to sell matrix runes. Tomorrow, I will go to the marketplace at the foot of the mountain. Maybe I can get something. Thinking of this, Suli slowly entered the state of practice. She, who was focused on restoring her cultivation, seemed to completely forget one thing. Before dawn the next day, Suli finished her practice. She put on the gray robe worn by ordinary janitors and went down the mountain. As for the origin of the gray robe, there were many ordinary gray linen clothes on Danxia Mount. Suli casually took a set, and no one found it. It was not the time for the janitors to start work, so the mountain road was quite deserted. Only a few janitors went with Suli. Other janitors glanced at Suli, and no one said anything. The janitors who went down the mountain at this time did nothing but buy some daily necessities for their masters. After walking for an hour, she finally saw a little outline of the small marketplace hidden in the forest. She was slightly relieved. It seemed that the information collected in the spiritual dining house yesterday was right. Walking down the last stone step, Suli came to the small marketplace. Both sides of the bluestone road were covered with stalls. Disciples of Danxia Mount in uniforms of Ymen branch and janitors sat on the ground, shouting like hawkers in the marketplace. Behind many stalls, there were small attics with simple decorations, which looked slightly upscale. At this moment, the sun had risen a little, and there were more and more people in the marketplace. Suli and Gray blended into the crowd inconspicuously. She walked around the marketplace and roughly figured out the structure of the marketplace. The structure was also simple. There were only 2 grades. The stalls on the ground generally sold daily necessities such as fasting elixir and cleaning runes, while the attics sold things really related to practice. Suli also saw a graded rejuvenation elixir in an attic called Wenyun Pavilion, which was marked with a high price of 50 low-grade spiritual stones. Although it was not a flawless elixir without impurities, it was enough to make any seriously injured practitioner in Zhuji realm recover to his peak state in a short time. I don't know if this elixir was refined by a disciple of Danxia Mount. If there is such a person, Suli's eyes flickered, and she finally focused on the plaque of the attic in front of her. Zhenlo Group. It's a little weird that there is a branch of Zhenlo Group in Huajian sect. Zhenlo Group was a mysterious force in Jiuzhou region, specializing in buying and selling materials and magic treasures related to tactical matrices. It had recruited more than 90% of matrix masters in Jiuzhou region. When she was the holy girl of Yushu sect, she was also a guest matrix master of Zhenlo Group, so she knew better than others what a proud force it was. For a small sect like Huajian sect, it was impossible for Zhenlo Group to send people to establish a branch. But now, an attic, which was obviously a branch of Zhenlo Group, was in front of her, which made Suli feel suspicious. Is it related to the tactical matrix I arranged? Thinking of the strangeness she noticed when she entered the sect, Su Li's immature face flashed with a trace of strange contemplation. Then she walked into the building with a large group of handyman disciples. The familiar smell of matrix materials poured into her nostrils. Su Li was refreshed and looked in the direction of the source of the smell. Sure enough, in a room with transparent walls, a matrix master was inscribing matrix patterns on a piece of low-grade spiritual stone. Judging from his technique, he should be a first-grade matrix master, which corresponded to Lianqi realm. The things he refined could only be bought by people in Lianqi realm. Many Ymen branch disciples of Danxia Mount stood outside the wall and watched, full of envy. It's so easy for matrix masters to earn spiritual stones, unlike us who take on the sect's tasks and work hard to get such a little reward. Matrix masters are scarce, so they are naturally distinguished. You should be satisfied that you can be reborn from a mortal and step into Lianqi realm. Skipping the whispers of the crowd, Su Li came to rows of transparent cabinets, where various grades of matrix runes and more advanced matrix compasses were placed. Su Li soon found the yellow matrix rune she wanted to refine and sell, one for 10 pieces of low-grade spiritual stones. Earth-based rune was a kind of matrix rune with extremely powerful defensive ability. Although it was expensive, as long as a practitioner in Lianqi realm who had adventured outside and had a decent family background, he must have a life-saving magic treasure with him. In addition, Su Li turned her head and her eyes fell on another smaller cyan matrix rune, one for 15 pieces of low-grade spiritual stones. Agility rune could add the power of wind to herself, and it was a perfect match for escaping with earth-based rune. Su Li's eyes showed a look of contemplation. A piece of low-grade spiritual stone could refine 2 agility runes, but it needed the cultivation of the 9th hurdle of Lianqi realm to support. Even with the spiritual power of secret records of Black Lotus, she estimated that she needed at least the 6th hurdle of Lianqi realm. I can only refine earth-based runes first, and then make plans later. Although she didn't know the purpose of the existence of Jinlo Group, it would be much more convenient for her to sell matrix runes with this building in the sect, and the materials of the tactical matrix for camouflage might also be obtained through this building. Chapter 336. Back to her residence, Su Li didn't see Jining again as she expected. She closed the wooden door and sat back on the bed. She took out the inferior spiritual stone and drew a straight line on the surface of the spiritual stone with a sharp silver light on her fingertips without any preparation. Clatter! The square stone was evenly split into 2 triangular stones. If they were weighed, it would be found that the difference in weight between the 2 stones would be no more than 1 yuan. Su Li picked up a triangular inferior spiritual stone, closed her eyes and thought for a moment. Then she murmured in a low voice. The earth nimbus floating in the nothingness slowly condensed on her fingertips, showing a little earthy halo. Sensing the rapid consumption of the spiritual power in her body, Su Li didn't dare to waste time and quickly carved on the surface of the spiritual stone. Her speed was many times faster than that of the first-grade matrix master who was admired and envied by others during the day. After a few dozen breaths, the surface of the triangular inferior spiritual stone suddenly burst into a dazzling yellow light. After the light dissipated, there were delicate golden lines on the surface of the inferior psychic awareness, just like the most exquisite handicraft in the world. I made it. Su Li sensed that the surging earth nimbus in the psychic awareness was integrated with the spiritual stone. She shook her sore arm, and a little blood appeared on her fingertips. Su Li's face was slightly pale, and she shook her head helplessly. The spiritual power of the 4th hurdle of Lianqi realm was still too little. She couldn't afford a spiritual pen now, so she could only use her fingers instead of a pen. But her physical body had not reached the level of her previous life, and the consumption of spiritual power was more than 100 times that of holding a spiritual pen. If her physical strength hadn't reached the peak of Zhuji realm, her fingers would have been broken by force. After these 2 earth-based runes are sold, my cultivation can at least be restored to the 6th hurdle of Lianqi realm. 7 days later, it will be the beginning of next month, and I can get another inferior spiritual rune. When Su Li was thinking, suddenly there was a knock on the door. She knew who was standing in front of the door without the psychic awareness. Suli hid the things on the bed, hid her injured hand behind her, and got up to open the door. Jining, who wanted to continue to knock on the door, immediately took a step back like a frightened rabbit. Then she reacted, forced a straight face, and said coldly, I'm not doing this for you. I'm just here to remind you. Don't forget that in a few days, Master will test our cultivation progress. Now 2 days have passed, and we haven't even gotten the mental cultivation method of Yunti realm. You tell me, what should we do? Suli was stunned. Seeing her expression, Jining immediately felt dizzy and asked helplessly, You don't really forget it, do you? Suli pursed her lips and nodded slightly. How could she care about such a trifle? Jining was speechless for a while. Now she finally knew why Suli's performance was good or bad. Suli could forget the important things related to her own fate. So, she was a fool. He didn't know what fear was, much less what humiliation was. It was no wonder that he didn't react at all when he was scolded by those 4 bad sisters. Did he misunderstand her? Jin Ying's imagination ran wild, and Suli gradually frowned. Anything else? Jining was confused by Suli's question. She was so depressed that she wanted to spit out a mouthful of blood, but she couldn't help but tell Suli what happened during the day. Today, I went to the book pavilion alone. Thinking of the first time she begged Suli to go to the book pavilion with her, Jining blushed. She immediately thought of something and said angrily, Suli, we are in trouble this time. Someone deliberately prevented us from getting the mental method of Yunti realm. They simply wanted us to lose face in front of the master. Suli raised her eyebrows, and the figure of the young man in white flashed in her mind. I went to the book pavilion today and saw the grumpy senior fellow apprentice again. But this time, I didn't listen to the advice of the gatekeeper disciple and entered the book pavilion. I thought I could get the mental method in this way, but the 4 bad sisters were also in the pavilion. Jin Ying's eyes turned red, and she didn't say anything. It was not difficult for Suli to guess how the 4 maids with silver tokens bullied her. Naturally, she couldn't get the mental method. I see. After a moment of silence, Suli simply replied and was about to close the door. Jin Ying's face was full of astonishment. She hurriedly stopped Suli and said anxiously, Junior sister apprentice Su, are you really stupid or pretending to be stupid? Now we are in the same situation. If we don't get the mental method to practice, we will be in trouble when the master asks about it. Tomorrow, you go to the book pavilion with me. Maybe we. Suli shook her head before she finished her words, I have something to do tomorrow. Let's go the day after tomorrow. After that, she didn't listen to Jin Ying's nonsense and forcibly closed the door. Jining stared at the bare door blankly for a long time before she came to her senses. She was so angry that she stamped her feet and couldn't help but scold, coward. Those senior sisters are right. Su, you are a coward. When I get the mental method, I won't give it to you. Just wait for the master's scolding. As she said that, she kicked the door heavily. A sharp pain came from the tip of her foot. She sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at the silent night outside. She bit her lip for a while, feeling wronged, and finally limped back to her room. In the room, Suli exhaled and held the second rune that emitted a faint golden light in her hand. She was concentrating on drawing runes just now, so she naturally didn't hear Jin Ying's cry. Early the next morning, Jin Ying still had a trace of fluke in her heart. She came to Suli's door, but no one opened the door after knocking for a long time. She finally couldn't stand it anymore. The grievances accumulated in the past 2 days burst out like a flood. She squatted in front of Suli's door and cried. After an hour, Jin Ying stopped crying. Looking at the still silent wooden door, she showed a touch of stubbornness in her eyes. She wiped away her tears and got up to leave, heading for the book pavilion. At the same time, Suli, who had been wandering in the marketplace for a long time, finally stepped into the Jinlo group. She trotted all the way to the empty window for purchasing materials related to the tactical matrix, took out an earth rune, and said crisply with a pure luster in her eyes, "Lord, my master asked me to sell something." The old man sitting behind the window saw that the person who came was a little girl full of spirit. Although she was dressed in the clothes of a servant, the old man couldn't help but show a kind expression on his face because of the spirit and elegance she exuded. Everyone has a love for beauty. In the cultivation circle, good-looking people would also receive a lot of preferential treatment, which was an eternal truth. "Well, let me see what your master is selling." The old man reached out to take the earth rune, and couldn't help but chuckle after scanning it with his psychic awareness. It turns out to be an ordinary earth rune. The price of Jinlo Group has always been fair. It is priced at 6 low-grade spiritual stones. What do you think, little girl? Su Li frowned secretly, but pretended to be surprised and said, "Lord, please take another look. My master said that this earth rune is very different, so he is interested in it. Otherwise, with my masters," as she spoke, Su Li suddenly covered her mouth, as if she had accidentally spilled the beans, and hurried to remedy it. The old man's eyes flashed. It seemed that the master of this little girl was at least a top-ranking inherited disciple in Huajian's sect. How could he be interested in the first-grade earth rune? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look more serious, and observed the triangular matrix rune in his hand more carefully. The foundation of Jinlo Group was profound, and the elder was well informed. Soon, he noticed a trace of strangeness, and his face changed slightly. He glanced at Su Li, who had an innocent face, in surprise and doubt. Then, he stood up and said, "Little girl, I will price this earth rune for 50 low-grade spiritual stones. Do you have other matrix runes like this?" Su Li was slightly shocked. She didn't expect that the old man could offer such a high price, but she showed surprise on the surface. She quickly handed over another matrix rune with her eyes sparkling. "That's all. My master only gave me 2. The old man put the 2 matrix runes together in his hands, and they were really integrated. His eyes shone brightly, as if he had found a rare treasure. He hurriedly walked to the depths of Jinlo Group with the matrix rune in his hands. Before leaving, he did not forget to hand over a heavy bag of spiritual stones to Su Li. Su Li glanced at the building and found that many people had noticed here. She hurriedly asked for help from the steward who gave her the spiritual stones. "Lord, my master said that we must leave from the secret exit of Jinlo Group." The steward immediately understood and thought that the master of this little girl was really thoughtful. He had seen the attitude of the elder of Jinlo Group just now, so he naturally did not refuse Su Li's request and happily took her to the secret exit. Seeing this scene, many practitioners could only give up the idea of robbing in their hearts. After Su Li left Jinlo Group through the secret exit, she didn't stay any longer and immediately went up the mountain to return to her residence. 100 low-grade spiritual stones can at least restore me to the 9th hurdle of Lianqi realm. Su Li put the spiritual stones under the rush cushion and breathed a long sigh of relief. Then her eyes flickered, revealing a calculating look. It seems that the appraiser of Jinlo Group knows something. He will definitely investigate me afterward, but she had a clean background. No matter how Jinlo Group investigated, they would never find out her previous life. So, her fictitious master became more mysterious and made Jinlo Group afraid. In this way, she had time to recover. Even if Jinlo Group found out that she was the one who refined the matrix rune in the future, she would have recovered her cultivation at that time. What was there to be afraid of? Thinking of this, Su Li smiled slightly, picked up a spiritual stone, and quickly absorbed it. At the same time, in the adytum of Jinlo Group, the old man who appraised Su Li just now stood respectfully in front of a delicate woman in a palace dress, who looked about 30 years old, without saying a word. Soon after, the woman in the palace dress exerted force in her hand, and the earth rune made of inferior spiritual stones was immediately crushed. The old man's pupils shrank. When he was about to explain, the woman in the palace dress waved her hand and said, "Needless to say, it is indeed the work of a matrix master who can inscribe the first-grade matrix on inferior spiritual stones. Chapter 337. When the old man heard what the woman said, his expression changed slightly, and he said nervously, "After all, the big mountain-protecting tactical matrix of Huajian's sect is left by that person. If it is really controlled by a tactical matrix master, it is too dangerous for you to stay here. You'd better go back. Calm down, Mr. Wang." The woman in the palace dress patted the powder in her hands and said with a smile, "Let's not talk about whether this is true or not. Even if Hua Yan really invites a tactical matrix master, she will not have the courage to open the third layer of this tactical matrix. The price is too low for her." Although the old man called Mr. Wang felt it was inappropriate, he could only nod. The woman in the palace dress held the remaining rune in her hand. After a moment of silence, she suddenly sneered, "I am determined to get the star-stacked tactical matrix. If Hua Yan is sensible, I don't mind exchanging with other tactical matrices. But if she is not sensible, I, Su Zini, am not to be trifled with." Mr. Wang looked slightly serious and whispered, "Miss, we don't have much time. If Jinlo Group realizes it, I know." Su Zini's eyes flickered. "Within a month, star-stacked tactical matrix will fall into my hands. When I get the inheritance of that place with this tactical matrix, I will surpass Su Zipei soon. Miss is wise." Mr. Wang flattered, and then frowned and asked, "The girl who sent the rune is a clue. Why don't we follow the clues?" "No." Su Zini rejected without hesitation, "It is a critical period now. Don't make trouble. It is not good for us to anger the tactical matrix master." Mr. Wang felt it was very reasonable, and immediately gave up the idea of investigating Su Li. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these 5 days, the door of Su Li's room had never been opened. During this period, Jining came to find her, but she had to leave when no one opened the door. On the 6th day, when the first ray of light from the east shone on the wooden door, the girl in the room, who was like an old monk in meditation, finally moved slightly. She shook off the gray stone powder and opened her eyes. At this moment, strands of black lines suddenly condensed in her eyes that were as clear as the sky, transforming into a lifelike lotus that swayed in the void for a moment before dispersing with a loud bang. Su Li exhaled a long breath and waved her hand to set off a gust of wind, sweeping away the accumulated stone powder on the rush cushion. She looked at the dark spiritual lake in her pubic region, which had occupied 70% of the entire pubic region. Level 7 of Qi Disciple. Su Li frowned slightly and picked up the remaining 7 low-grade spiritual stones on the edge of the rush cushion. A full 93 low-grade spirit stones only let her advance from the 4th level of Qi cultivating to the 3rd level of Qi cultivating. Too slow. This kind of progress was far lower than her expectation. The unexpected joy of selling 2 earth-based talismans at a high price also faded in her heart. She originally thought that relying on these 100 low-grade spirit stones, even if she couldn't recover to the 1st level of foundation establishment, it would be more than enough for her to reach the 10th level of Qi refining. It should be noted that a practitioner with a complete ordinary spiritual root would consume no more than 49 stones from the first hurdle of Lianqi realm to Zhuji realm. Even in Yushu sect in the previous life, with her heavenly spiritual root, she only absorbed about 110 low-grade spiritual stones to successfully break through. But now, the change was too great. The speed at which she absorbed low-grade spirit stones was frighteningly fast. For ordinary aura refining cultivators, absorbing 1 low-grade spirit stone a day was already their limit. However, in less than 5 days, she had already absorbed close to 100 low-grade spirit stones. On average, she consumed 20 spirit stones a day. Su Li couldn't help but be speechless. She felt that the road ahead was difficult. It took her 100 spiritual stones to advance from the 4th level to the 7th level. She didn't know how much more it would take to advance to the 3rd level of Qi cultivating. Thinking of this, Su Li spread out her palm. With a thought, a group of dark spiritual power appeared in her palm. The extremely condensed black shone like a gem in the slightly dark room. No wonder. The quality of the spiritual power has reached the 4th level of foundation establishment. Of course, the low-grade spiritual stones are useless. I should be able to absorb the middle-grade spiritual stones now. Taking back the spiritual power, Suli hesitated for a moment and injected a wisp of spiritual power into the ring of reincarnation mirror. In the past, when the quality of the spiritual power was still at the level of Lianqi realm, she had tried it, but the ring of reincarnation mirror did not respond at all. Now that the quality of the spiritual power had reached Juji realm, she wanted to try if she could repair the mirror ring slightly, so that she could save the energy of arranging the tactical matrix for camouflage. After 10 minutes, there was no movement from the mirror ring. Suli was silent and continued quietly. With the consumption of the spiritual power in her body, her face gradually became pale. An hour later, Suli's forehead was covered with cold sweat, and her body trembled slightly. The spiritual power in her body had been squeezed to the last drop. But at this moment, her eyes were as bright as day. Under her gaze, there was a trace of black luster on the surface of the originally dim ring of reincarnation mirror. If you didn't look carefully, you couldn't see it at all. A faint suction came from the mirror ring. Suli's eyes were slightly fierce. She grabbed the remaining low-grade spiritual stones with one hand, and the latter turned into powder in the blink of an eye. All the spiritual power flowed into the mirror ring through Suli's body, and the spiritual power floating in the surrounding nothingness was directly sucked up. Not enough. Suli clenched her silver teeth, almost bleeding, but she was already at the end of her rope. If she continued, it would consume her foundation, which was not worth the loss. Do I really want to waste all my previous efforts? Suli was a little unwilling, but her reason prevailed. She slowly moved her hand away from the mirror ring. Suddenly, the black lotus ring appeared from the ring finger. The black lotus pattern slowly rotated, and an obscure and profound secret method was transmitted into the awareness sea. After understanding the meaning of the secret method, Suli's eyes suddenly condensed. Without saying anything, she slapped the heart with a strange method. The severe pain affected the nerves, and Suli's face immediately turned pale. Then she opened her mouth and spat out a mass of bright red blood. Blood from the heart. It would take at least half a month for her to recover after spitting out the heart blood. Black lotus ring, don't let me down. With a gasp, Suli pinched her fingers with difficulty and pinched a gesture with a strange shape beyond the common sense of the human clan. At the moment when the gesture began, the shape of the blood mass floating in the nothingness suddenly changed, and seemed to form the outline of a word. Crack, 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 the finger bones constantly made unbearable sounds, and the severe pain made Suli faint. But she understood that if she gave up now, it would really be a heavy loss. She had no way out. Crack. Suli's movements were stiff, and she sweated like rain. Her little finger hung down softly. If it went on like this, she was afraid that before the gesture was completed, her 10 fingers would be broken. She must speed up. But the pain of speeding up would be increased 100 times. A ruthless expression flashed between her eyebrows, and her movements immediately accelerated. The continuous sound of bones cracking sounded like firecrackers. In just a few breaths, the blood mass in the nothingness turned into a word, slave, at a speed visible to the naked eye. The bright red blood suddenly turned dark, just like Suli's black spiritual power. With the last strength, Suli gritted her teeth and sent the blood mass into the ring. Then, regardless of the result, she fainted on the rush cushion. After a long time, Suli frowned and opened her eyes. Thinking of what happened before she fainted, she woke up quickly and sat up directly. Jining, who was holding the porridge bowl, was startled. Jining threw the porridge bowl to the bed. Suli subconsciously wanted to catch it, but this movement made her 10 fingers hurt so much that she almost fainted again. Seeing that the porridge was finally spilled on the bed without burning Suli, Jining breathed a sigh of relief. She quickly took a rag to wipe the bed and whispered, "Don't worry. I didn't tell anyone that you are hiding here. No bad guys will find it." Suli was stunned and didn't know why. Jining had leaned over and looked at Suli's hand distressingly. She said tearfully, those people went too far. They didn't allow us to practice and hurt you like this. Don't worry. When I become stronger in the future, I will definitely avenge you. Hearing Jin Ying's words, Su Li understood that this girl probably blamed her injury on the 4 maids with silver tokens. She looked down and saw that her 10 fingers were well bandaged, and the blood on her body was cleaned up. It was hard to imagine how a princess who grew up in the imperial palace learned these things. Her psychic awareness covered her whole body, and a feeling of weakness arose spontaneously. She frowned. The spiritual power lost in the pubic region had not been replenished in time. But when her psychic awareness flowed to her wrist, she couldn't help but smile slightly. The ring of reincarnation mirror had a feeling of being connected with her heart and blood. In this life, she was no longer a puppet in the hands of reincarnation mirror. Even one day in the future, she could become the real owner of reincarnation mirror. Even if reincarnation mirror became a broken thing now, it still didn't hinder Su Li from being happy. One day, she would wake up the mirror spirit. She must get back what happened in the illusion. It was not her style not to take revenge. When she looked up and saw Jining with a worried face, Su Li's cold eyes became a little more gentle. Indeed, Su Li never claimed to be a righteous person. For the sake of practice, she did something out of line without any psychological burden. She had always been indifferent to strangers, but once someone got her approval, Jining was only 15 years old. It was normal for her to be afraid when she entered the sect at a young age, so she was more dependent on Su Li. But she was in trouble and didn't want to have cause and effect with others. So, her attitude towards Jining was naturally very indifferent. But this girl, even if she was rejected by Su Li again and again, she still saved Su Li without hesitation when she saw Su Li sneaking into the room. Maybe it couldn't be called saving, and maybe this way was stupid, but there was no doubt that she had won Su Li's favor. She looked up at Jining with a faint smile and teased, I remember someone said that she would never talk to me, a coward. Jin Ying's little face immediately turned red, and she stammered and retorted, You must have heard it wrong. I didn't say that. After saying this, Jining suddenly froze, and then looked at Su Li with great shock. Su Li was stunned, and then asked with a smile, Is there anything on my face? No, Jining opened her mouth slightly, and finally confirmed that what she saw in front of her was not an illusion. She said blankly, You actually smiled. After joining the sect for so many days, she had never seen Su Li smile, let alone talk to her so gently. Chapter 338. Su Li didn't explain anything to Jining. She preferred to explain everything with actions. Jining seemed to be used to Su Li's style of doing things. After feeding Su Li porridge again, she left quietly. If she stayed here all the time, she would inevitably be discovered. Looking at the night outside, Su Li's spiritual stone spread like mercury, and soon all the surrounding buildings appeared in her psychic awareness. This was a relatively remote woodshed, not far from Jining and her residence. But no one was assigned to it, so it had been empty. Su Li didn't know how Jining found this place. There is still no Numa of Wang Yu on the peak. Su Li withdrew her psychic awareness and pondered. On that day, Wang Yu told them to get the mental method of Yunti realm by themselves and come back a few days later to check their progress. It was inappropriate to give such an order. On the surface, she and Jining were just ordinary girls who had just entered the sect and knew nothing about cultivation. As the saying went, the master leads the way, but the cultivation depends on the individual. But Wang Yu didn't even take the step of leading them in, which was too irresponsible. Although Danxia Mount is a little chaotic, the cultivation of those disciples is not bad. Wang Yu should not be such an irresponsible person. She should be delayed by something. Su Li speculated, and the thought dissipated, it's good that no one disturbs me. When my injury recovers, I will take the girl to the book pavilion. Su Li calmed down and concentrated on recovering her spiritual power. She still had many things to do. Although the ring of reincarnation mirror had a connection with her, the effect of shielding the nature's mystery was not enhanced. Somehow, the body of evil ghost gave her an intuition that when she broke through Zhuji realm, even if she hid in the mountain-protecting tactical matrix of Huajian sect, she would be in danger of being discovered by natural law. The tactical matrix of camouflage still needs to be prepared. Fortunately, it seems that Wang Yu will not come back in a short time, so I still have time. Thinking of this, the last trace of thinking in Su Li's eyes faded away, and she completely entered the state of meditation. Only a trace of psychic awareness wandered outside and was alert to the outside world. Several days passed in the blink of an eye. In these days, Jining came several times intermittently and brought Su Li a few bowls of spiritual rice porridge. The injury on Su Li's hand had recovered a lot, so she didn't need Jining to feed her anymore. She saw that Jining wanted to say something to her several times, but she didn't ask. "Tomorrow, I'll go to the library with you." Putting down the empty bowl, Su Li suddenly said. She could naturally sense that more than 10 days had passed, but the girls still hadn't stepped into Yunti realm. It was time to solve the trick in the book pavilion. Jining was slightly stunned, and then her face changed slightly. She shook her head and said, "You can't go." "Why?" Su Li frowned slightly, and Jin Ying's heart tightened for no reason. It seemed that the consequences would be very serious if they disobeyed the will of the person in front of them. Dispelling the strange thoughts in her mind, Jining sighed helplessly and said sadly, "Junior sister, don't ask. Once you've recovered, we'll descend the mountain together. The immortal Tao is destined to have no fate with us." Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly. Looking at the gray disciple uniform worn by Jining, she said nothing more. Jining thought that Su Li had listened to her, so she didn't say much. She picked up the lunch box and left the woodshed. Seeing that Jin Ying's movements were no longer jerky, Su Li felt strange. Jining didn't go to the book pavilion these days. What could she do? It was a silent night. In the early morning of the next day, Su Li woke up from meditation. She could stretch her fingers freely, and her injury had almost recovered. Even if she fought with others, she would not be affected. It's time to solve some troubles. Murmuring in a low voice, Su Li got up, put on the pink disciple uniform, and walked to the book pavilion. When the purple air came from the east, it was the best time to practice. All the pavilions above the mountainside of Danxia Mount were lifeless and immersed in practice. The guarding disciple of the book pavilion sensed the rising pneuma everywhere, and he was full of expectations. When his guarding task was over, he would take the reward from the first senior sister to practice well. At this moment, the guarding disciple suddenly saw a pink figure not far away. He stared at her. Wasn't Jining already? How dare she come? Su Li came closer. The guarding disciple saw her quite strange face, and then remembered that she was the other child with immortal latency who came with Jining on the first day. It was just that this girl's sense of existence was too low. If she didn't appear now, he would have forgotten that there was such a girl. The instructions of the first senior sister did include her. It was not easy to get rid of Jining, and it was just a few days of peace. Su Li glanced at the guarding disciple who looked a little unnatural. She stretched out her hand to hand out the token, and said lightly, "Can I go in?" The guarding disciple was suddenly stunned. Looking at Su Li, who looked a little cold, he couldn't help but wipe his eyes. Was this the same person as the weak girl who came last time? Senior fellow apprentice, Su Li reminded him. The guarding disciple suddenly shivered and returned the token to Su Li. When he was about to dispel her idea of receiving the mental method, he found that Su Li directly turned around and walked inside, without giving him a chance to speak. At the thought of the reward he was about to get, the guarding disciple's face suddenly became gloomy, and he said bitterly, "Little girl, you asked for it." He took out a carrier rune from his arms, sketched on it, and crushed it. When Su Li stepped into the gate of the book pavilion, a fresh and elegant ink fragrance immediately came to her face. Most of the carriers of precious mental methods in the cultivation circle were jade slips, and the contents could only be obtained by exploring with psychic awareness. Some less important cultural miscellaneous records, geographical records of the cultivation circle, and other popular knowledge were mostly in the form of book rubbings. The first floor of the book pavilion was mostly used as bookshelves instead of the matrix platform for placing jade slips. Suli glanced around and immediately saw the elder of mental method on the first floor dozing off behind the counter. She went to the counter without saying anything, took out a blank rubbing, and knocked on the table. This knock was extremely exquisite. Suli had secretly used the secret method of sound attack, but the elder of mental method on the first floor only had the cultivation of the fifth hurdle of Lianqi realm. Naturally, it was difficult for him to detect it. He just suddenly felt upset and wanted to do something. When he opened his eyes and saw Suli holding the blank rubbing, he was suddenly stunned. Before he figured out the situation, he saw Suli respectfully handed over the rubbing and said, "By the order of the Mount Head, I specially come to copy the rubbing of the mental method of Yanti realm. Elder, please give me the original copy." The elder of mental method of Yanti realm subconsciously handed over the original copy in a daze. When Suli took it and began to copy, he suddenly woke up with a quiver. Oh, it was the child with immortal latency. Stop! The elder of mental method shouted and tried to grab the writing brush in Suli's hand. Suli's hand was empty. She raised her head and looked colder. "Elder, what can I do for you?" The elder of mental method saw that Suli was not frightened at all, but there was a meaning of questioning in her words. He couldn't help but be speechless. He couldn't think of a reason to stop her for a while. He secretly cursed the 4 maids of Yulin. Who said that these 2 girls were cowards? How to explain the one in front of him? Suli slightly raised her eyebrows and hid her fingers in her sleeves. She condensed a trace of spiritual power and quietly extended it to the edge of the tactical matrix to the upper stairs. The tactical matrix to protect the book pavilion was originally a submatrix of star-stacked tactical matrix. Suli broke a small hole without any effort. After pretending that it was accidentally damaged, she then questioned, "Elder, could it be that you want to help me get a better brush? Or, you don't want to listen to the order of Mount Head at all and give me the mental method of Yanti realm?" Seeing that Suli was not afraid at all at such a young age, the elder of mental method was embarrassed and immediately became angry. He crushed the writing brush in his hand into pieces, presumptuous. "You are just a little handyman disciple. Who gave you the courage to offend me?" "Oh." Suli glanced at the eyes gathered around her and the tactical matrix of the second layer that had some movement. She sneered, "You're so powerful. Courage? I think. Elder, you are more courageous. For your own selfish desire, you stop your disciple from copying the mental method. I also want to ask, who gave you the courage?" Hearing this, the disciples who came to watch the fun suddenly changed their faces. They put down the books in their hands and hurried away. They couldn't afford to get involved in this vortex. Elder Shinfa was so angry that he almost fainted. He resisted the urge to slap Suli to death, pointed at her nose tip and scolded, "Nonsense. You know how to confuse people at such a young age. For the sake of Mount Head, you can be punished for the death penalty, but you can't escape punishment. I will let you know, who has the final say in the book pavilion." After Elder Shinfa said this, he slapped Suli's delicate face with a palm as big as a cattail leaf fan. This slap must make Suli's skin bleed. The few disciples who dared to stay to watch the fun suddenly felt unbearable and turned their heads. Suli didn't dodge. She glanced at the hole in the tactical matrix whose fluctuations subsided, and there was a trace of coldness in her eyes. How did Hua Yan manage the sect in such a foul atmosphere? If Danxia Mount only had these people who fawned on the rich and were obsessed with power, then Danxia Mount didn't need it. Just when Suli was about to fight back and expose herself, suddenly, a faint voice echoed in the awareness sea of Elder Shinfa. "Who has the final say in the book pavilion?" "Elderly, you're really awe-inspiring as a mental cultivation elder. If even half a strand of hair on this girl's head is injured, you'll have to go to the cold wind pagoda to reflect on your mistakes. As soon as Elder Shinfa heard the cold wind tower, he stared with his eyes wide open. He forcibly withdrew his palm with his pneuma and blood flowing in the opposite direction, and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What's going on? How can the first elder know what happened on the first floor? Elder Shinfa was full of horror. His next words and deeds would be noticed by the first elder. If he still persisted in doing things the wrong way, he must go to the cold wind tower. Thinking of this, Elder Shinfa showed a kind smile. After a while, he was suddenly dumbfounded. It seemed that he didn't even know the name of this girl until now. Chapter 339. Hearing the footsteps, Elder Shinfa immediately thought of something, and his face changed. Before he could do anything, the 4 maids with silver tokens had stepped into the book pavilion. Seeing Suli holding the rubbing in her hand, the leading maid's face immediately darkened. She stepped forward and scolded, "Little bitch, you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." As she said, she was about to step forward and slap Suli. Elder Shinfa remembered the instructions of the first elder, and his eyes turned red. He grabbed the maid's arm and waved it hard. Clap! The crisp and loud applause resounded throughout the book pavilion, and the maids suddenly went crazy. "Li Zhanggue, are you tired of living? How dare you hit me?" She didn't understand why Li Zhanggue, who had always flattered her, would hit her. Didn't he want the reward from the master? Li Zhanggue smiled coldly. He was about to die, and he didn't care about the reward. As handyman disciples, you only have one chance to enter the book pavilion every month. If you want to enter again, you have to pay contribution points. But you just broke in recklessly and didn't pay attention to the rules of Danxia Mount at all. Do you think you deserve to be beaten? The maid was slightly stunned and looked at Li Zhanggue as if she was looking at a fool. Rules? Li Zhanggue, are you stupid after practicing too much? How dare you talk about rules with me? If you don't make it clear today, you will die when I go back and tell the master. Who is your master? Suli suddenly spoke, and everyone could not help but be slightly stunned. At this moment, she dared to interrupt. One of the other 3 maids seemed to be unable to hold back. She stood up and looked at Suli as if she was looking at a dead person, and said coldly, "Little sister, listen carefully. Our master is the next master of Danxia Mount, first senior sister apprentice Yulin. If you offend her, do you think you still have a way to live?" Suli was silent, and the maid immediately thought she was afraid, and laughed wantonly. Li Zhanggue's heart sank, and his eyes showed worry. Yulin was too powerful, and it was still unknown whether the first elder would be her enemy or not, but not long after, he received the sound transmission of the first elder again. After hearing the instructions, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief, and his face became tough again. "Guards! Chase these troublemaking maids out of the library pavilion. If you resist, kill without mercy." The maidservant fell into a complete daze upon hearing this, and her eyes were filled with disbelief. How could he, a mere chi-refining stage elder, dare to disobey the master's order? Shwa shwa shwa. Groups of law enforcement disciples with powerful auras rushed in. The 4 maids' faces paled and their bodies began to tremble. Apart from their backers, they were just maids at the peak of Yunti realm. Not to mention a team of law enforcement disciples, even one of them was enough to defeat them. Seeing that Suli was protected by Li Zhanggue, the head maid with a silver token showed deep hatred on her face. "Wicked girl, if you have the ability, you can stay in the book pavilion for a lifetime. Let's go." Suli narrowed her eyes slightly, and the dim light flowed in them. Li Zhanggue did not notice her change. After the 4 maids left, he finally had time to hand over the golden rubbing in his hand to Suli and explained, "This is a rubbing of Yunti realm personally copied by a genius of Danxia Mount. It has a better effect on practice. Take it back and send it back to the book pavilion after you understand its meaning." Suli took over the rather heavy rubbing, smiled slightly, and nodded, "Thank you, elder." Once she took action, in order to ensure that the details were not leaked, she must kill all the witnesses. As the real master of the star-stack tactical matrix, it was not difficult for her to do this. It could be said that the person who secretly stopped Li Zhonggui not only saved the lives of everyone in the book pavilion, but also saved herself. Don't be so polite. Li Zhonggui waved his hand and looked at Su Li's calm face. He was surprised and doubtful in his heart. He did not know whether she was really calm or she did not understand the situation after today. If she annoyed the proud master, it was hard to guarantee that she would not do something out of line. However, this matter had been reported to the first elder, and Su Li's life or death had nothing to do with him. Naturally, he would not be a good person to remind her. He just waved his hand to let Su Li leave, and hurried to the top floor of the book pavilion. For maids with silver token returned to an extremely spacious and exquisitely decorated courtyard near the top of the mountain. The leading maid dismissed the 3 people behind her. She passed through several courtyard doors and came to the adytum located in the deepest part of the courtyard. She knelt down and cried, "Master, please forgive me. I screwed up." Before she finished her words, the door of the adytum rumbled open. Yulin, wearing a light green gauze dress, swayed out of the door and sat on the chair in the outer room. Her expression was indifferent but inviolable. The chief maid knelt on the ground and did not dare to breathe. As time passed, there were only Yulin's gentle tapping on the table and the maid's slightly heavy breathing in the room. Finally, at a moment when the maid could not bear it, Yulin opened her mouth with a high prestige, "Chun, what's the matter? Don't tell me that you can't even deal with a 15-year-old child." The maid's body tightened, and she quickly said, "Master, it's not Jining, but another girl suddenly launched an attack. I don't know why Li Zhonggui went crazy. He even invited the law enforcement team and drove us all out of the book pavilion. We couldn't stop it. That girl should have got the rubbing of Yunti realm." "What?" Yulin's eyes opened slightly, and the maid immediately lowered her head even more, wishing to stick to the ground. Yulin's eyes were indifferent, and she withdrew her gaze. Chun had been with her since she was a child for 10 years. She naturally would not doubt what Chun said. However, did Li Zhonggui dare to confront her? Yulin sneered. If there was no one behind him, then he was really tired of living. The secret realm of shattered spirits is about to open, and I am in need of cultivation resources. I don't know what the old thing Wang Yu is thinking. She even wants to give half of my resources to those 2 useless children with immortal latency. I can't tolerate any sand in my eyes. Chun knelt on the ground tremblingly, and did not dare to talk nonsense. She had heard her master disrespectful to the Mount Lord more than once, and she had long been used to it. Su Li's hateful and plain face appeared in her mind. She suddenly plucked up her courage and said, "Master, why bother? Since you don't want those 2 little maids to mess things up, why not?" Chun said, and made a gesture of cutting her neck. Yulin was slightly stunned, and raised her eyebrows. She said in surprise, "I didn't expect you to have such courage. This has crossed the bottom line. If I am found out, my position as the first disciple will come to an end." Chun thought she had said something wrong, and suddenly looked flustered. But Yulin waved her hand indifferently. The position of the first disciple is related to the quota of the secret realm of shattered spirits. Otherwise, who cares about this position? However, you have reminded me. As she spoke, Yuling flipped her palm and a jade talisman that glowed with spiritual light flew into Chun-er's hand. "Take this talisman and go to the market at the foot of the mountain to find someone. Tell him, it's about time. When you make your move, get rid of those 2 girls." Chun was shocked. She knew her master's plan very well. Was her master finally going to kill that senior fellow apprentice? It was like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife to kill a cow by asking that lord to kill Jining and Su Yu. A trace of pleasure appeared on Chun's face, and she sneered. Su Yu was doomed. Su Li returned to her original residence with the golden rubbing in her hands. She walked to the place where Jining lived next door. When she was about to knock on the door, she suddenly frowned and gently pushed the door open. There was no one inside, and Jean Ying's pneuma was very faint. That girl hadn't come back to live for at least 3 days. Was it because of her broken finger that she was also afraid and found another place to hide? Su Li frowned and turned to the woodshed where Jean Ying had hidden her. The residences of handyman disciples on Danxia Mount were widely distributed. It was impossible for her to find them, so she could only wait for her in the woodshed. Approaching the woodshed, Su Li suddenly heard a faint cry. She immediately quickened her steps and pushed open the door of the woodshed. Suddenly, she saw Jean Ying squatting on the edge of the bed, crying like a pear blossom in the rain. There was a meal box beside her, which contained hot spiritual rice porridge. Seeing that Su Li suddenly came back intact and stood in front of her, Jean Ying was instantly stunned. Then an unspeakable grievance rose from the bottom of her heart. She directly got up and threw herself into Su Li's arms, wailing. "Wu! I thought you were dead. They all say Yu Chun is a devil who kills without batting an eye. Wu! I thought I would never see you again, Wu." Su Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hearing the cry of the little girl, she gradually calmed down and gently patted her back. She really couldn't bear to hate this girl. After a while, Jean Ying stopped crying. She blinked her red and swollen eyes and asked aloud, "Junior Sister Apprentice Su, where have you been?" "I thought." Before she finished her words, she saw Su Li take out the golden rubbing and put it in front of her. "I brought the mental method of Yunti realm." Hearing this, Jean Ying's eyes suddenly widened, and she stammered and couldn't say a complete sentence. You didn't," Su Li nodded and said with a smile, "I went to the book pavilion." Jean Ying was confused, and immediately picked up the golden rubbing and was about to rush out of the door. Su Li was confused, and Jean Ying suddenly stopped and said in a panic, "Junior Sister Apprentice Su, run away. If you are found stealing, you will definitely be beaten to death." She begged for 10 days, but Elder Xinfa didn't say anything and didn't copy it for her at all. Now Su Li suddenly took out such an exquisite rubbing. She couldn't think of any other way except stealing. Su Li couldn't help laughing and was about to explain. Suddenly, her face changed, and she looked up at the door over Jean Ying. Jean Ying looked back with some doubts. She was so scared that she trembled and retreated to Su Li's side. Under the tree not far from the door, there stood a silent figure wrapped in a black robe. Chapter 340. The evening lights were dim, and the thin man in a black robe standing under the tree looked weird. "Who are you?" Jean Ying grasped Su Li's lapel tightly and plucked up her courage to ask. Before she finished her words, the black robe wrapped around the man's face fell, revealing a slightly pale face. This face was so ordinary that no one would notice him if he stood in the crowd. After the black robe was taken off, a faint breath of nauseating blood spread from his body. The emerald green branches stained with this breath immediately showed a tendency to wither. Su Li's eyes were slightly fixed. A blood practitioner, who had practiced to the 6th hurdle of Zhuji realm. How could there be such an evil practitioner in Huajian sect? Seeing those withered flowers and plants, Jean Ying was so scared that her face turned pale. She pulled Su Li with a trembling voice, "It's terrible. Let's run away. There is a window behind the house, Ah!" Before Jean Ying finished her words, the man standing under the tree at the door suddenly blurred. He approached her in a few flashes and knocked her out with a palm. "So noisy. I don't like noisy children." The man's voice was hoarse and unpleasant, like fingernails rubbing on a rusty copper surface. The room quieted down. The man turned his bloody eyes and looked at Su Li, who was still calm. He said with interest, "You don't seem to be afraid of me." Su Li smiled slightly and said in a flat voice, What's there to be afraid of?" The man was slightly stunned when he heard the words, and then the interest in his eyes became stronger. "It's interesting. A mortal girl who has not yet entered Tao has no awe for cultivation. I have never seen such a thing. You are the first one. Originally, the one who sent me the message asked me to kill you two little girls directly. But now, I have changed my mind. Suli raised her eyebrows. What's the idea? The man laughed in a low voice and pointed to Jining, who had fainted on the ground. Kill her. As long as you kill her, I will accept you as a disciple and take you away from Huajian's sect. I will even teach you all I know and make you as free as me. After that, he looked at Suli expectantly, almost foreseeing how excited and ecstatic she would become. It was her favorite thing to make people hope and then let them die in despair. However, the truth was clearly not progressing in the direction he had hoped for. Suli curled her lips slightly, and her calm eyes became sarcastic. You, a blood practitioner in Zhuji realm, dare to say that you are free and unfettered in the cultivation circle? As soon as the words came out, the man's face changed wildly. He finally realized the extraordinariness of Suli and subconsciously wanted to keep away from her. But at this time, he found that a white and delicate little hand had been put on his shoulder, and then, boom! An incomparably heavy force suddenly erupted, as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him. Half of the man's shoulder directly collapsed with a kacha sound, and all his internal organs were crushed. You! The man's eyes widened, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't understand why Suli, who looked weak and harmless, had such terrifying strength, and her temperament was decisive and cold-blooded. She was more like an evil practitioner than him. Spare me. Feeling that the huge force on his shoulder was getting heavier and heavier, the man said with difficulty. He didn't think about anything now, and only hoped to survive in the hands of Suli. Suli narrowed her eyes slightly, and suddenly smiled. Okay. The man looked happy. Suli raised her left hand, and under his horrified expression, she slapped on the top of his head. Ah! You said. The man's eyes were bloodshot. After squeezing out the 4 words, his head drooped down, and he could no longer speak. Suli slowly withdrew her hand, and muttered to herself, I have seen your eyes many times. But I don't have the habit of explaining to living people. Glancing at Jining, who was still in a coma, Suli waved her hand to close the wooden door, and returned to the bed with Jining in her arms. She reached out and hit Jin Ying's Heian acupoint to make her sleep deeper. After doing these, Suli returned to the man's corpse, took off the universe bag from his waist, and was lost in thought. Although it was the first time that she killed someone since reincarnation, her memory was still there, and she had long been numb to life and death. Looking at the bloody corpse in front of her, her heart didn't fluctuate at all. My cultivation has not recovered to Zhuji realm, so I can't use the soul-searching skill. However, I can also guess that the first disciple, Yulin, is behind this person, so I don't need to waste my energy. Thinking of this, Suli frowned. How should she deal with this person's corpse? If it was an ordinary practitioner, she could burn it with fire, but he was a blood practitioner, who had reached Zhuji realm. He had swallowed at least tens of thousands of people's blood essence, so his blood and energy were so strong that they didn't disperse. After his death, the blood and energy would evaporate, and even the universe bag couldn't stop it. It might even become poisonous blood and contaminate the entire Danxia Mount. If she burned it with fire, the blood and energy would only evaporate faster. She didn't want to be exposed now, and she couldn't let the only corpse ruin her plan. Looking at the dark night sky outside, Suli shook the black robe and wrapped the corpse. She lifted it with one hand and was about to push the door open to find a remote place to deal with it. But at this moment, a rainbow flashed in the sky and fell into the hall on the top of Danxia Mount. Suli immediately stopped, and looked slightly serious. Wang Yu was back. If she went out to deal with the corpse of the blood practitioner at this moment, the movement would definitely be noticed by Wang Yu. She must find another way. Perhaps sensing Su Li's thoughts, Black Lotus Ring suddenly emerged on its own and rotated slowly. This time, instead of sending any useful information to Su Li, it sent a suction force to the corpse wrapped in black cloth. Su Li was slightly stunned, and sensed that Black Lotus Ring seemed to be asking for her opinion. Can you deal with this corpse? Su Li frowned and sent out an idea. Black Lotus Ring rotated more cheerfully, and the suction force also increased. Obviously, it acquiesced to Su Li's words. Well, let me see how you are going to solve it. Su Li loosened her palm, and the black cloth immediately fell down, revealing the corpse. Black Lotus Ring could do whatever it wanted. Almost instantly, the suction force of Black Lotus Ring increased countless times, but it only acted on the corpse, and Su Li was not affected. Then Su Li saw that the man's body seemed to be shattered by a huge force, and turned into a thick purple blood mist, which was all absorbed by Black Lotus Ring. After a few breaths, there was only a pile of white powder left on the ground, and Su Li waved her hand to disperse it. Except for the black robe, there was nothing to prove that the blood practitioner had ever existed. Su Li was surprised by the means of Black Lotus Ring, and suddenly her ring finger was hot. When she looked down, she saw that the originally dark Black Lotus Ring had become blood red at the moment, and a tear-shaped blood-red crystal was slowly growing in the center of the lotus mark. When the blood-red crystal grew to the size of a fist, the heat of Black Lotus Ring faded. Su Li took off the blood-red crystal in surprise and doubt, and looked at it carefully. I have never seen such pure blood essence that is condensed to the extreme. How powerful will it be if it is refined into forging blood elixir? Su Li's eyes were shining. Under the quenching of the starlight of reincarnation mirror, her physical strength in this life was far greater than that of the same period in her previous life. Although her cultivation was still in Lianqi realm at the moment, she was not worse than any monster at the peak of Zhuji realm in terms of strength and physical body. My physical body has been promoted to the bottleneck. It is not difficult to refine forging blood elixir, and the auxiliary medicine is simple and easy to get. Only the blood-melting grass is difficult to find. When my cultivation is restored, I can leave Huajian's sect to find it. Thinking of this, Su Li also put the black robe on the ground into the universe bag, cleaned the cabin, and then returned to her previous residence with Jining. Seeing that Jining would not wake up in a short time, Su Li sat on the edge of her bed, took out the universe bag she got before, and explored it with her psychic awareness. A small space of less than 10 square meters appeared in her awareness sea. The man was obviously a casual practitioner. The things in the space were piled up in a corner in 2s and 3s. Su Li glanced at them. Except for 500 low-grade spiritual stones and a dozen middle-grade spiritual stones, she did not find any particularly valuable treasures. Most of them were refined blood. As soon as Su Li touched them, she knew that they were all the blood of babies, which was harmful to nature. She frowned slightly and shook her head with a wry smile. Compared to what she had done in the illusory realm, this was nothing. Although everything in the illusory realm was fake, her memories were not fake. The righteous ideals that she had always adhered to had long been completely destroyed in the illusory realm. The only thing that was left was her conscience as a human. Su Li took out all the blood and burned them one by one. After chanting the sutra to eliminate the resentment, most of the things in the universe bag were empty. There were only some inferior healing elixirs left. Su Li lost interest after a glance at them. As long as there were herbs, she could refine them at will. Seeing that it was almost dawn, Su Li's psychic awareness was about to withdraw from the universe bag to practice for a while. Her eyes inadvertently glanced at her wrist, and the psychic awareness that was about to withdraw stopped immediately. The ring of reincarnation mirror was trembling. However, the trembling was too small. If she hadn't taken a look, she wouldn't have noticed it at all. Is there something in the universe bag that caused it to react? Su Li hesitated for a moment, took off the mirror ring, and slowly stuck it on the universe bag. In her previous life, reincarnation mirror was the oldest treasure in the world. Not to mention the universe bag, even the more advanced universe ring couldn't contain it. But now, Su Li only saw a flash of light, and the mirror ring disappeared instantly and appeared in the spiritual stones that she had not yet withdrawn from the universe bag. It's so weak. What happened 1,000 years ago? Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. Before she could think about it, there was a new change in the universe bag. In the universe bag, the ring of reincarnation mirror floated in the nothingness and trembled slightly. Wisps of dust were drawn from the pile of debris and injected into it. This dust, Su Li's psychic awareness intercepted a section and observed it carefully. But it was just ordinary dust. Why could the ring of reincarnation mirror absorb it? Could it be? Su Li thought for a moment and had a guess. Chapter 341. Buzz. The mirror ring exuded a wave of vitality from inside to outside, as if it had a life at this moment. It kept rotating in the nothingness, gradually fading the rust on the surface, and became silver again. But before the rust faded to 40%, the reincarnation mirror stopped. It seemed that it had exhausted its energy and fell on the ground of the universe bag, making a sweet and crisp sound. Su Li activated her divine awareness. With a flash of white light, the mirror ring reappeared in her hand. The feeling of blood connection was condensed and did not fade away because of the change. She gently rubbed the bright side with her palm, and her eyes couldn't help narrowing slightly. The mirror ring on this side became a little thicker. Was that powder really a part of the reincarnation mirror? The reincarnation mirror is indestructible. Not to mention practitioners of Jindan realm, even the Grand Elder of Yushu's sect who had reached Yuanying realm couldn't hurt it. But now it is broken into powder. The figure of the old beggar flashed in front of Su Li. This person's cultivation was more terrifying than she imagined. At least he had reached the legendary Huashan realm, which had condensed the primordial spirit. Qi Xianqing, who could talk with him on an equal footing, was not bad. In the cultivation circle, he could be called a mighty, and any one of them was a big shot at the level of the old ancestor of a sect. When she was in the place of the Huashan realm, she reached the supernatural realm, which was nothing compared with the real world and Jindan realm. A game of chess between almighty beings is too far away for me. Su Li breathed a sigh of relief and temporarily suppressed the chaotic thoughts at the bottom of her heart. She evoked a trace of black spiritual power and injected it into the ring of the reincarnation mirror. In less than a breath, the breath of spiritual power was completely suppressed by the mirror ring. Seeing this, Su Li relaxed her eyebrows. Anyway, the mirror ring's ability to shield nature's mystery has been enhanced. At least in Lianqi realm, I don't need to worry about shielding nature's mystery. For me, it's a good thing. Next, I don't need to rush to practice. I should first make up the pneuma and blood lost by the ring of reincarnation mirror. At this time, a painful moan awakened Su Li from her contemplation. She looked up and saw Jining frowning and opening her eyes. Jining was at a loss for a moment. She remembered what happened before she fainted, and suddenly woke up completely. She sat up and grasped Su Li's hand tightly. She was about to speak, but Su Li spoke first. Why are you sweating so much? Did you have a nightmare? Jining was slightly stunned. She saw the furnishings around her. Wasn't this her own room? If he wasn't in the woodshed, could it really be a dream? She felt a little confused. She touched her aching forehead and tried to remember what happened before. She clearly remembered that she was in the woodshed. Could it be that she had been dreaming all day? Seeing that she was still suspicious, Su Li couldn't help but smile and said, "When I came back, I found that you fell in the woodshed. I don't know how you passed out. The bed in the woodshed is too hard. I was afraid that you couldn't sleep well, so I carried you back." Jining suddenly understood. She had some impression of this memory. Fainting. Could it be that she fainted from crying? She blushed slightly. After believing junior sister Su's words, she immediately felt a little embarrassed. Fortunately, junior sister Su didn't ask her how she fainted. This is the mental method of Yunti realm that I got from the elder of the book pavilion. I have already read it. You should also take a good look at it. It's late at night, and I have to go back to rest. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Su Li took out the golden rubbing, put it on Jin Ying's bedside, and turned away. Although there were still some loopholes under her cover, it was the best she could do now. As for the rest, she could wait until she reached Juji realm, and then erase Jin Ying's memory. Jin Ying stared at the golden rubbing blankly. She slowly picked it up and touched the cover. The familiar touch still remained in her mind. She had seen this thing in her dream. She had never seen a dream that was more real than the one she had today. Was the conversation in the woodshed and the mysterious and terrifying black-robed man really a dream as junior sister Su said? Or, were they all true? Jin Ying was more confused, and then a strong curiosity arose in her mind. If it wasn't a dream, how did Suli escape with her? Unfortunately, the black-robed man had turned into dust. As long as Suli didn't say it, she was doomed to not get the answer. It was a silent night. In the early morning of the next day, the roar of the spirit beasts sounded in the mountains. Suli opened her eyes and waved her hand to open the door, letting the morning light shine in. Her delicate cheeks were as delicate as pink snow, which made people unable to put them down. Suli touched the lotus mark at the corner of her eyes, and her eyes flickered. Last night, the starlight guided by the reincarnation mirror increased by more than 30%. She could sense that her physical body had a considerable improvement. If her physical body directly broke through to Jindan realm, her perception was still there. What she needed to do to restore Jindan realm was only a huge amount of spiritual power. I don't know whether the secret realm of shattered spirits of Yushu sect still exists. After thousands of years of accumulation, the innate spirit lake of that secluded place should have recovered a lot. If I can go there, while thinking about it, Suli suddenly noticed something. All the expressions on her face quickly disappeared, and she became well-behaved. Soon after she put on the gray linen clothes and covered the ring of the reincarnation mirror, a rainbow light flew from the sky and landed in front of the wooden house in the blink of an eye. Jin Ying, who heard the movement, quickly climbed out of the back window of the wooden house and jumped into Su Li's room. She immediately saw Su Li also hiding at the door. Although there was not much expression on her face, it could still be seen that she was afraid. Jin Ying was slightly surprised. Today's junior sister apprentice Su seemed to be a little different. After the rainbow light dissipated, Wang Yu scanned with her divine awareness and saw Jin Ying's movement. She couldn't help but be slightly stunned. But when she saw Su Li's hands were wrapped in white cloth, and there were faint dry black blood spots, her face immediately sank. What happened in the peak after she left? Thinking about it, she stepped forward, cleared her throat, and said in a low voice, "Open the door, two girls. I'm back." Hearing this long-lost female voice, Jin Ying was surprised. She didn't have time to wonder about Su Li's reaction, and immediately went to open the door bolt. Looking at the slim woman in red in front of the door, tears quickly gathered in her eyes. She couldn't care about anything, and suddenly threw herself into Wang Yu's arms. "Master, you're finally back, woo-woo." Wang Yu frowned, but soon relaxed. She didn't push Jin Ying away, but gently patted her on the back, and said in a slightly gentle voice, "Tell me, what have you been doing these days? Why didn't you practice?" With her cultivation, she could naturally see that Jin Ying and Su Li were still just mortals, and they hadn't even reached the first hurdle of Yunti realm, which was very abnormal. Glancing at Su Li, who was still hiding far away, she sighed softly. It seemed that Siyu had been hurt more, and even became wary of her. "I managed to grab these two girls from Yuan Shu. Their cultivation talents can rank second and third among the disciples of this session. I'd like to see who is playing tricks." Seeing that Wang Yu was going to support them, Jin Ying's eyes suddenly brightened, and she intermittently told what had happened these days. "On the second day when my junior sister apprentice and I went up the mountain, we wanted to get the mental method according to your instructions, but we encountered difficulties from the gatekeeper disciples and elders, and we couldn't get the mental method." "The elder guarding the pavilion didn't give you the mental method?" Wang Yu almost thought that she had heard it wrong, and she was astonished. At this moment, Jin Ying continued, "I cried and begged for 10 days, but I couldn't get it. Every time, I would encounter 4 sisters with silver tokens who made things difficult for me. They robbed my clothes and asked me to change into gray clothes to help in the dining room. They also said, if I went to the book pavilion again, I would be in danger. By the way, junior sister apprentice Sue has been recuperating since her finger was injured. Yesterday, she went to the book pavilion, and stole the mental method of Yunti realm. Master, please don't blame her. She was possessed at that time. She is definitely not a thief. As Jining said, she took out the rubbing and presented it with both hands. Wang Yu took the booklet with a gloomy face, and her heart was already full of anger. Of the two boys she had personally accepted, one was forced to go to the spiritual dining room, and the other had all 10 fingers broken and was seriously injured. Who on earth dared to meddle in Danxia Mount? Was he tired of living? Taking a deep breath, Wang Yu forcibly suppressed her anger. After comforting Jining with a gentle expression, her eyes fell on Su Li. Little Su, come here, too. Su Li was shocked. The ring of reincarnation mirror ran to the extreme, and the secret methods of Black Lotus she ran was hidden in the deepest pubic region. On the surface, she showed hesitation, and moved over after a few seconds. Seeing Su Li approaching, Wang Yu looked slightly relaxed, and then gently lifted Su Li's hands wrapped in thick white cloth, and slowly uncovered them. As layers of white cloth with blood fell, Wang Yu's face became more and more ugly. When the last layer was uncovered, she had a feeling of not knowing where to start. The last layer of white cloth had been dyed black and brown, and it was glued to the wound on the hand. If it was torn forcibly, it would tear the wound again. You're insane. How is it different from the evil circle to treat a little child like this? Looking at Su Li, who looked gloomy but still didn't cry, Wang Yu's eyes were slightly sour, and her heart was full of tenderness. Her firm voice sounded sonorous, I will help you get back all the grievances and injuries you have suffered. 3 days later, in the side hall at the top of Danxia Mount, Yunxia Hall. Su Li sat cross-legged on the exquisite silk bed, looking at the intact hands in front of her, and showed a thoughtful look. In the past 3 days, she and Jining had been living in Yunxia Hall, and with the help of medical practitioners, their injuries were all recovered. Wang Yu really fulfilled her promise, and all the disciples of the book pavilion related to this matter, such as Li Zhonggue, were sent to Hanfeng Tower, and the 4 maids who bullied Jining were thrown out of Danxia Mount with broken limbs. Such a big event happened, and Danxia Mount was suddenly in a state of panic, and even bullying among handyman disciples rarely happened. Su Li was very satisfied with this result, at least on the surface. As for Jining, she was naturally very happy these days, and quickly came out of the previous shadow. Fan Zisong, the inherited disciple who was responsible for teaching the two, looked at them, and couldn't help but nod slightly. The task assigned by the master was finally completed, and the 2 junior sisters had reached the first hurdle of Yunti realm. At this time, a red light flashed over the palace. Master is back. Chapter 342. Greetings, Master. In the main hall, Fan Zisong stepped forward quickly. His thin and handsome face showed respect, and he bowed his head slightly to salute. Wang Yu looked indifferent and nodded gently. She had been cultivating for thousands of years, and her mind was as deep as the sea. Naturally, she would not easily show her inner emotions on her face. How is the task I gave you? In order to compensate Ying and Su Li, she specially woke up her most promising disciple from practice and asked him to teach her personally. Fan Zisong straightened up and replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Master, both junior sister apprentices have good talents and reached Yunti realm within 3 days. Wang Yu looked satisfied. According to your observation, how are the temperaments of these 2 girls? Fan Zisong paused and analyzed bluntly, junior sister apprentice Jining is simple and ignorant, so there is nothing to say. The key is junior sister apprentice Su Yu. Oh. Wang Yu raised her eyebrows, what's wrong with that girl? Junior sister apprentice Su Yu talks very little. Fan Zisong recalled Su Li's performance in the past 2 days and said aloud, most of the time, she stays alone and is very unsociable. When Jining was cultivating, she asked me a lot of questions, but that girl didn't ask anything, and her cultivation progress was not bad at all. In terms of intelligence, junior sister Su is obviously better, but if you want her to be loyal to master, I am afraid it will be a little difficult. Wang Yu thought of the scene of meeting with Su Li 3 days ago and couldn't help but nod. Indeed, that girl is born like this. She didn't do it on purpose, so it's not appropriate to force her to change her character. However, judging from her performance in the days when I left, she is not a cold person, but quite affectionate. You don't have to worry too much. Yes, master. Fan Zisang responded, and then looked hesitant. Master, Yulin. Wang Yu looked slightly cold and snorted. She was accepted by the old guy of Zihan sect. Does she really think she is a big shot? Even if those 2 girls are only my nominal disciples, they're not people she can touch. For the sake of Zihan sect, I won't do anything to her for the time being. After the secret realm of shattered spirits, you'll be the winner. Then, I'll see if she has any reason to continue to encroach on my Danxia mount. With that, Wang Yu's eyes fell on Fan Zisang, who looked respectful, and the lines on her face softened. Zisang, you are the first personal disciple I have accepted since I stepped into the cultivation world. Outsiders think that you are my servant, but you have been dormant for many years. Even I feel inferior to you in terms of accumulation. The selection of the secret realm of shattered spirits this time is your chance to soar to the sky. Fan Zisang's eyes, which had always been gentle, suddenly burst out a breathtaking light. He said firmly, I will live up to your expectations this time and make Danxia Mount famous. His target was not only Yulin. He, who had some adventures, had set his eyes on the genius with sword physique who walked out of Huajian sect a long time ago. Back then, that person killed many people in the secret realm of shattered spirits and got the biggest benefit. If he couldn't do it, wouldn't he be letting down the inheritance he had encountered back then? Wang Yu laughed loudly. Okay. I'll see your performance. The selection of the secret realm of shattered spirits is coming. Teaching Jining and the other 2 girls is just incidental. Don't delay your own practice. Fan Zisang showed a gentle smile and nodded. I understand. I have been practicing in isolation for many years, and I have reached the limit of improvement. It's good for me to adjust my state during this period. It's good that you can think so. I'm going to practice. You can leave now. Excuse me, master. After Fan Zisang left, the smile on Wang Yu's face faded, and she looked gloomy. Obviously, Yulin's matter was not as easy as she said. Zihan sect was such a giant. As long as an elder of Naiman branch in Yuanying realm came, Huajian sect would have a hard time. Before the headmaster started the closed-door training, he had told her not to fall out with Zihan's sect unless it was absolutely necessary. Yulin did have the capital to be arrogant, but she secretly embezzled other disciples' cultivation resources before. Now she even became worse and bullied her. Did she really think she was a soft-footed shrimp? She didn't get the title of Fairy Huiyun for nothing. The selection of the secret realm of shattered spirits. Yu Longshan, I'd like to see if you dare to violate the Jiuzhou covenant to fight me if your granddaughter dies on the arena. On the other side, Fan Zisang returned to Yunxia Hall and saw Jining playing with the maid. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile. When he was her age, he was still wandering and begging in the secular world. If his master hadn't brought him back, he would have died on the street. Now hundreds of years had passed, but those miserable experiences seemed to be yesterday. Turning his gaze, he saw Su Li sitting at the table and seemed to be in a daze. With more interest in his eyes, he walked over. Seeing him approaching, Su Li frowned. Others thought she was in a daze, but she was actually practicing. Her state of mind was far beyond her cultivation, so she could absorb the spiritual power without meditating. Although the efficiency was half lower than meditating, the advantage was concealment. As long as he didn't appear within 30 meters around her, she wouldn't feel the fluctuation of the spiritual power. But now, seeing that Fan Zisong had stepped over the boundary of 30 meters, she had to stop practicing and hide the mental method in the deepest part of her body. Junior sister apprentice Su, what are you doing? Fan Zisong asked softly with a jade-like gentle smile on his face. Su Li glanced at him and didn't speak. Then she bowed her head in silence. A trace of embarrassment flashed in Fan Zisong's eyes, but he didn't get angry. Instead, he began to talk about his past experience. His master didn't have many disciples in her life, and all of them were dead except for him. He finally had 2 junior sisters, so he was very concerned about them. Su Li listened with her head down. She couldn't do anything except listen. It could be seen that this person tried to soften her wariness, which was somewhat similar to Tantaiyu in the illusion. But she didn't know whether this person did it from his heart or Wang Yu's order. 2 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Fan Zisong looked at Su Li, who was still stubborn, and couldn't help but feel helpless. He told so many miserable experiences in those years. If it were Jining, she would have burst into tears, but her expression didn't change at all. Could it be that her experience was more bitter than his? It seems that it is necessary to know the past of my junior sister apprentice. Thinking of this, Fan Zisong chatted with Su Li for a while and turned away. Looking at his back, Su Li's eyes were slightly gloomy, and she quietly withdrew her psychic awareness. Her realm of soul was much higher than Fan Zisong's, so she didn't attract his attention when she explored just now. This person's foundation is solid, and there seems to be an extremely terrible power hidden in his body. Even I feel a little scared when I explore it. If he was in Yushu's sect in those years, even if he didn't burst out that power, he would almost reach the level of the top 3 disciples of Naiman branch. But, why is his name not famous in Danxia Mount at all? Is it possible that Yulin has a higher talent? With a hint of doubt in her heart, Su Li glanced at Jining, who was still playing. Her desire to explore faded away, and she continued to be silent. The top of the mountain was the place where the spiritual power of the entire Danxia Mount gathered. The concentration of the spiritual power was more than 10 times higher than where Su Li stayed before. For 5 days, Su Li didn't sleep or rest, and finally pushed her cultivation to the peak of the 8th hurdle of Lianqi realm. When she was about to break through to the 9th hurdle, she suddenly sensed an extremely unstable pneuma bursting out of the main hall. What happened? Wang Yu can't even control her own pneuma. Su Li looked slightly serious. Jining, who was sitting aside and also working hard to practice, couldn't help but look over and asked curiously, Junior sister apprentice, what are you looking at? Su Li withdrew her gaze and shook her head, nothing. Continue to practice. Jining didn't know why, and she naturally couldn't sense anything. She had to continue to work hard to find the opportunity to meditate according to Su Li's words. Senior fellow apprentice Fan said that as long as she could enter the meditative state, the speed of practice would become extremely fast. At this moment, in the main hall, Wang Yu crushed the jade rune in her hand, and there was still some horror on her face. I've only been back for a few days, and the situation has become so serious. Li Guang, the head of Fujian Mount, who was also in the hall, also looked solemn and said in a deep voice, we don't have much time. Before the headmaster comes out of practice, we must not let Su Zini succeed. Without further ado, let's rush to the place of the accident immediately and snatch the thing back before Su Zini. Wang Yu's temperament was also decisive. She immediately nodded and said, Senior fellow apprentice, go back and prepare. We'll set off immediately. Li Guang breathed a sigh of relief and turned to leave. Wang Yu was the most powerful one among the 3 mount heads, and it would be great if she could go to help. But before he flew away, he was stopped by Wang Yu again. He turned back and looked puzzled. Wang Yu looked a little pale and said, Senior fellow apprentice, please find your disciple, Han Feng, and ask him to give me the positioning compass to find the child with immortal latency. Li Guang was stunned, and then he realized that what happened in Danxia Mount in the past 2 days had almost spread to the whole sect. Of course, he had heard about it. Junior sister apprentice is worried about the 2 little girls. Don't worry, I'll call Han Feng. Wang Yu looked grateful and sighed, thank you, senior fellow apprentice. If the first elder could leave the book pavilion, I wouldn't be so passive. Alas, Li Guang smiled slightly and said, junior sister apprentice, don't be discouraged. All the difficulties are only temporary. As long as the headmaster successfully breaks through to the late stage of Yuanying realm, Zihan's sect will spit out all the things that we have taken from Huajian's sect these years. Well. Wang Yu was refreshed, and then couldn't help but feel pity, but, poor two little girls, they have just stepped into Yunti realm. After going to the secular world, they are destined to waste some time. Li Guang nodded helplessly. If Yang Chuanbua hadn't been taken to the forbidden area of the back mountain by the headmaster who had temporarily finished practice, he would probably be worried about it. Chapter 343. A moment later, Su Li saw two rainbow lights, one red and one green, fly away from the top of the mountain. As she stared at them, Fan Zisang's figure appeared at the door of Yunxia Hall. He stepped into the hall quickly, with an imperceptible solemnity on his gentle face. He smiled at Su Li and Jining, junior sister apprentices, you have been in the sect for more than half a month. Do you want to go back to your hometown? Jining's big bright eyes immediately lit up, and she nodded repeatedly, I miss my mother. Senior fellow apprentice, can we really go down the mountain to visit her? In the past few days, the maids around her instilled a lot of common sense in the cultivation circle to her. She also knew that after ordinary children with immortal latency went up the mountain, they could only go down the mountain after their cultivation had been successful. It was against the rules for them to go down the mountain after less than half a month. Fan Zisang nodded with a smile, I'll go with you this time. Don't be afraid. Great. Jining was so happy that she almost jumped up. She was really simple. Fan Zisang's care for her these days had already made her feel dependent on him. Looking at Jin Ying's bright smile, Fan Zisang felt relaxed for a moment. He turned to Su Li, who had not spoken, what do you think, junior sister apprentice? Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. As soon as Fan Zisang spoke, she had already understood Wang Yu's good intentions. She immediately nodded gently, it's up to you, senior fellow apprentice. Hearing Su Li's all-purpose answer, Fan Zisang was very helpless. After half a month of contact, he gradually got used to her cold temperament and continued, I've seen the positioning compass. Your hometown is much closer than your Jining dynasty. Let's go to Tiehe village first, and then set off. The two responded together. Fan Zisang didn't give Su Li and Jining time to prepare, and directly took them away from the sect. It was no more than 10 minutes after Wang Yu left. When Yulin got the news, the hall on the top of Danxia Mount was already empty. Standing in front of the hall, she took a deep breath and sneered. Fan Zisang, don't think that I don't know that you are the direct disciple of Wang Yu, the bitch. But, how can you compare with my strength and foundation? In the selection of the secret realm of shattered spirits, I will let everyone know that you are not qualified to carry my shoes with your insignificant cultivation. With a heavy snort, Yulin's phoenix eyes were fierce. She casually threw out a stripe and smashed the delicately carved rockery into stone powder. Only then did she feel a little better. She floated away in the eyes of many Chor's disciples who were as silent as cicadas in winter. Fan Zisang drove the flying magic weapon and took Su Li and Jining all the way to the desolate place. Jining sat beside Su Li and touched the cloud magic weapon under her from time to time. There was a strong yearning and curiosity in her eyes. Fan Zisang found it interesting and couldn't help but explain, this magic weapon is called Feiyun, which is a unique flying magic weapon of Huajian sect. It is divided into 2 grades. Practitioners in Zhuji realm can travel 3,000 miles a day by driving the low-grade Feiyun, while masters can travel 6,000 miles a day by driving the high-grade Feiyun. Wow, so powerful. Jin Ying's eyes were sparkling. It was rare to see a precious horse that could travel thousands of miles a day in the secular world. She didn't expect that in the cultivation circle, a flying magic weapon could kill it in seconds. Su Li listened with little expression, but a faint trace of memory flashed in her eyes. Fei Yun, Hua Yan's talent was not so good, but her state of mind was really extraordinary. She started cultivation with flowers. After stepping into Jindan realm, her cultivation speed was no less than that of Su Li, who had a heavenly spiritual root. She still remembered that when they met, Hua Yan once said that she would cultivate a unique spiritual cotton. The fruit was a natural flying magic weapon, which could be used with a little bit. In this way, she could save a lot of money to buy flying swords for her disciples, and she could even sell it to the public. At that time, Hua Yan asked her to give the spiritual cotton a name, and she just said, Fei Yun, casually. Unexpectedly, after 1,000 years, Hua Yan not only successfully cultivated this kind of spiritual cotton, but also really named it, Fei Yun. A cultivator's feelings were very thin. Although she and Hua Yan were like-minded in the past, time could change everything. She couldn't be sure if the current Hua Yan was still the same as before. She couldn't be sure if the current Hua Yan would look down on her or even betray her because of her cultivation. Therefore, even if she knew that Hua Yan was practicing in isolation in the forbidden area of the back mountain, she never thought of going to see her. However, when she heard the word, Fei Yun, she was a little touched. Maybe, everything is not as bad as I think. Turning her head, Su Li looked at the clouds falling behind her, and the figure of a female practitioner in Taoist robe with outstanding temperament slowly appeared in front of her. Master, are you all right? A day and a night passed in the blink of an eye. Under the tireless urging of Fan Zisong, the three of them finally saw the outline of Tiehe village the next evening. Jining looked at the small village with smoke below and blinked her eyes. Was this the hometown of Junior Sister Apprentice? Junior Sister Apprentice's talent was better than her. She didn't expect that she was born in a backward mountain village, which was very different from what she imagined. Fan Zisong took out the positioning compass and compared it. He nodded and said, "Here we are. Let's go down first." As he said, Fei Yun accelerated and swooped down. After the experience last time, the villagers of Tiehe village obviously had some understanding of cultivation. When a villager saw Fei Yun, he immediately shouted, "Here they are. The immortals are coming again." What? The immortals are coming again? The old village head was slightly happy when he heard the shout. He quickly picked up his crutch and was about to go out, but a figure was faster than him. It was Li Yuehuan who had failed before. I must be selected this time. Even Su Li can go to the immortal gate. How can I be worse than her? Li Yuehuan stared at the gradually falling clouds in the sky. The ferociousness in her eyes made old Li quite frightened. He sighed secretly and followed her with his crutch. Since the immortal came last time, this child seemed to be possessed by the devil. She didn't do any work and dreamed of going to the immortal gate to become an immortal all day long. If she failed again this time, he really didn't know what she would become. Junior Sister Apprentice, is that your home? Fan Zisong pointed to a low earthen house. After the latter nodded, he landed without hesitation. He was also immortal, so he didn't mind it much. Huang was collecting sweet potatoes in the field. Although he heard the villagers' shouts, he was alone now and didn't want to join in the fun. But when he looked up, he saw a cloud fall at the door of his home. He couldn't help but be stunned. Soon after, he saw the clouds disperse, and two beautiful girls and a young man who was as gentle as jade appeared. Li! Huang exclaimed. Without saying anything, he put down the hoe and ran home. A touch of worry appeared on his face. Shouldn't Li be practicing in the sect at this time? How could she be sent back? Li Yuehuan, who ran the fastest, also saw Su Li. Her expression suddenly froze, and then she saw the indifferent young man who was more perfect than the last time. She couldn't help but be overjoyed. Su Li must have made a mistake and was expelled from the sect. Her chance came. With that in mind, she ran even faster as if there was wind beneath her feet. Seeing all the villagers of Tiehe village gathered, Fan Zisong looked indifferent. When he was promoted to the inherited disciple, he also came out to collect children with immortal latency, so he was no stranger to this scene. When he saw Li Yuehuan, who was the first to arrive, panting, and seemed to have the joy of reuniting with his little junior sister on her face, he couldn't help but smile at Li Yuehuan. Li Yuehuan was immediately flattered. Regardless of other villagers coming behind her, she directly knelt down with a plop and said loudly, "I'm Li Yuehuan. Please take me into the mountain to practice and step into the path of cultivation." Seeing Li Yuehuan had knelt down, many children in the village who came later were so angry that their faces turned green. Why were they one step slower and let Li Yuehuan take the lead? Fan Zisang was slightly stunned, and then he realized that it was not because of reunion with Su Li, but because they mistakenly regarded him as an inherited disciple who came to collect children with immortal latency. He was about to explain, but Li Yuehuan, who couldn't help pointing at Su Li first, said, "Su Li, she has been a jinx since she was a child. She doesn't like to talk and is clumsy. She is not suitable to stay in the immortal sect. She deserves to be expelled from the immortal sect for offending you. Since you sent Su Li back, there is no position for you. It's better to accept my daughter, who will do better than Su Li." Fan Zisang listened to Li Yuehuan's words and laughed instead of being angry. He didn't need to argue with a child who was hundreds of years younger than him, but Li Yuehuan obviously had some conflicts with his junior sister apprentice. He was worried that he couldn't have a close relationship with his junior sister apprentice. However, what was the matter with the name, Su Li? There was a slight doubt in his heart, but he also knew that it was not the time to ask questions. He just put it in his heart and didn't show it. Seeing the smile on Fan Zisang's face, Li Yuehuan immediately confirmed that she was right. She forcibly suppressed the ecstasy in her heart and was about to continue to say bad things about Su Li, but Huang rushed to kneel in front of Fan Zisang. "Immortal, please forgive me. If Su Li is disrespectful to you, it's because I didn't teach her well. She is still young. Immortal, please don't argue with Su Li." Then, Huang was about to kowtow. Seeing Su Li frowning, Fan Zisang immediately waved his hand to stop Huang. Seeing that he couldn't kneel, Huang couldn't help but be more frightened. Did Su Li really make a big mistake and the immortal refused to accept his kowtow? At this time, Fan Zisang finally said in a gentle voice, "Old man, please calm down." Then, he turned to look at Li Yuehuan, who was full of expectation, and his smile faded. "Little girl, who gave you the courage to say bad things about my junior sister apprentice?" Hearing this, Li Yuehuan, who began to feel that something was wrong, suddenly turned pale and trembled. "Su Li, she didn't." Fan Zisang didn't want to continue talking with her. He raised his head and said loudly to the villagers, "Go away. I'm just here to accompany my junior sister apprentice home to visit her relatives." Chapter 344. The villagers of Tieha village naturally didn't dare to listen to Fan Zisang's words and dispersed. At night, in the wooden house, Huang put a basket full of cooked sweet potatoes on the table, rubbed his hands and apologized, "Immortal, there is nothing delicious at home. Sorry to make you laugh." There was a trace of shame on his face, but there was still a hint of surprise in his eyes. According to what Fan Zisang said in front of everyone, it was a great thing that Su Li was accepted as a disciple by the Mount Head in the sect. With the protection of her master, Su Li could survive in the cultivation circle even if she didn't make great achievements in the future. Fan Zisang smiled after hearing Huang's words. His slender hand, which used to kill people with a sword, picked up a sweet potato, which seemed a little strange. "It doesn't matter. I haven't eaten the food of mortals for many years, and I miss it." Huang nodded. It seemed that Fan Zisang was much kinder than the previous two immortals, but he, who had lived in the sect, knew clearly that all this was because of Su Li. After tasting the sweet potato, Fan Zisang, who was used to eating spiritual cuisine, frowned and turned to Su Li and Jining. "You too, go to practice. Even if the spiritual power in the secular world is not enough, don't slack off." "Yes, senior fellow apprentice." Su Li glanced at Huang and went to the inner room with Jining. Huang had good eyesight. After the two closed the door, he immediately bowed and said, "Li is indebted to you. No matter what you want to know, I will tell you everything I know. You are a smart person, so I don't have to waste a lot of words." Fan Zisong changed his sitting posture and looked at Huang, who looked tense. He still looked kind and squinted with a smile. "Don't be nervous. I just want to know the past of the junior sister apprentice and her name." Huang knew that he couldn't hide it anymore, so he immediately told him the whole story of Han Feng changing his name, and then he told him clearly about Su Li's life experience that he knew. Fan Zisong was enlightened. The name, Su Li, was indeed a taboo in the cultivation circle. However, when the bloody accident happened, he was not born yet and did not experience the horror of that year. He didn't feel much except for obeying his master's instruction not to mention the name. Junior Marshal Brother Han did well. It's good that Junior Marshal's sister can avoid the taboo and cultivate in peace. However, Junior Marshal's sister's background is really... Fan Zisong showed understanding in his eyes. Anyone who had been tortured by his father since childhood would have a different state of mind from ordinary children. What's more, she had suffered a lot. So that lotus mark is actually a scar. Fan Zisong muttered to himself. Before he stepped on the path of cultivation, he wandered around without parents, but no one deliberately abused him. Although the junior sister apprentice was born with sound parents, it was worse than having no parents. Now that junior sister has entered master's tutelage, it can be said that the bitterness is over and the sweetness is beginning. Fan Zisong, who thought he completely understood Su Li's past, felt a sense of pity in his heart, and immediately looked at Huang with a more gentle gaze. Now the cultivation circle in Jiuzhou region is declining, and Junior Marshal's sister apprentice is also a 1 in 1,000 cultivation genius. You have helped Junior Marshal's sister apprentice, so I, as her senior marshal brother, can't be stingy. After saying that, he spread his psychic awareness to cover Huang. After exploring his physical condition, he was slightly surprised. This person's pneuma and blood were refined, and his pneuma was smooth. He was not like a mortal at all. On the contrary, he was about to enter Yunti realm, and only needed a practice method. Huang noticed Fan Zisong's change, and quickly bent down and said, "I used to be a handyman in Yushu sect for several years. Later, I made some mistakes and was driven down the mountain. I'm only alive. Sorry to make you laugh at me." "No wonder." Fan Zisong suddenly understood, "It seems that you have reached the peak of Yunti realm. When you went down the mountain, you were deprived of your memory and cultivation, but you can still maintain your physical state. It's really rare." Huang smiled bitterly. His cultivation was deprived and his foundation was greatly damaged. When he came to Tieha village, he clearly felt that his physical strength was not as good as before, and his body was a little worse than that of ordinary people of the same age. But over the years, he worked hard every day for Su Li, and his physical condition was getting better and better instead of deteriorating. This made him puzzled, but he also knew that it was not appropriate to ask Fan Zisong about it, so as not to complicate matters. "Well, since you have this opportunity, I will give you a practice method of Yunti realm. This method is not passed down from Huajian sect, but obtained by me personally. If you can make some achievements with it, it is your good fortune. However, you must remember that only you can practice this method, and you must not pass it on to others. Otherwise, you know the end." Fan Zisong was silent for a moment, and suddenly said. Huang was stunned when he heard the words, and then he was ecstatic. Without saying anything, he knelt down and kowtowed, "Immortal, I, Huang Dashan, will remember your kindness. I swear to heaven that I will never pass on the practice method to others." Fan Zisong smiled slightly and nodded gently. At his cultivation, a mental method of Yunti realm was nothing. In the inner room, Su Li's psychic awareness covered the central room. Seeing this scene, she couldn't help but frown slightly. She wanted to pass on a mental method to Huang Dashan when she came back, but she didn't expect that Fan Zisong did it for her, which saved her a lot of trouble to explain. After Huang Dashan took a rest, Fan Zisong glanced at Su Li and Fan Zisong, who had fallen asleep. Then he pushed open the courtyard door and left the mud house. The night was as cold as water, and the whole Tieha village was shrouded in silent darkness. Occasionally, there were a few barks. He walked all the way to Taishui River and looked at the ink-like river in the night, with a strange light flashing in his eyes. Boy, this river is really a bit weird. An old voice suddenly came from the jade token around his neck. Fan Zisong suddenly heard it. Instead of being surprised, he was happy. He quickly communicated with the owner of the voice with psychic awareness. Senior, you wake up. 200 years ago, he got this jade token and awakened the existence in it. Under the guidance of the senior who didn't want to be named, he didn't know how many detours he took. There were some obscure treasures that even the master didn't know, but the senior could easily get them and use them to improve his cultivation. He knew that the mysterious senior must have an extraordinary background. He always believed in repaying kindness with kindness. When he succeeded in his cultivation one day, he would definitely find a suitable physical body for the senior to resurrect him. However, in recent years, the senior's sleeping time was getting longer and longer. He couldn't help but worry whether the senior could wait until the day he succeeded in his cultivation. Boy, what are you thinking about? Go east as I said. The old and familiar voice came into his mind. Fan Zisong immediately came to himself and walked to the place pointed by the senior. A moment later, Fan Zisong walked to the end of Taishui River. Looking at the bare khaki hillside that had been over-harvested, he said helplessly, Senior, there is no mystery on this mountain. Are we really going to go up? Stop. It's weird here. Squat down and condense the vital energy according to the formula I gave you. Fan Zisong did as he was told. He drew a semicircle with his right hand and combined it with his left hand. A full moon-like shadow was suddenly reflected on the river in front of him. Fan Zisong himself was surprised by this strange phenomenon. He had learned this technique for some time, but he had never encountered such a situation before. If Su Li was here at the moment and saw this strange phenomenon, she would definitely recognize that this was not a full moon shadow, but clearly reincarnation mirror. Sure enough, it's really here. The old voice suddenly became excited. Yunjing Lake, the disappeared Yunjing Lake, is actually here. Fan Zisong was confused. He vaguely felt that the three words, Yunjing Lake, were a little familiar, but he seldom paid attention to the past of the cultivation circle. He frowned and thought for a long time before he remembered the origin of the name. He couldn't help but be surprised. Senior, is the Yunjing Lake, you mentioned the lake that the ancient treasure, reincarnation mirror, broke and fell into 1,000 years ago? It's said that Yunjing Lake is rooted in the void, boundless and comparable in size to Jojo. How could it be? Fan Zisong looked at the ordinary river in front of him that could be crossed with one step. He couldn't help showing a strange expression. Perhaps no one would associate this river with Yunjing Lake. Reincarnation mirror. The old voice became a little bitter. After a long time, a sigh came out. The past is a mystery. Who knows what happened at that time? Even the ancient treasure could be broken. Nothing is impossible. Fan Zisong nodded, but he secretly kept a secret in his heart. He had never seen the senior show his emotions, but the senior was so excited when he mentioned reincarnation mirror just now. In the jade token, the shadow in a gray robe raised his head. His eyes seemed to pass through the jade token and see the endless void. The location of Yunjing Lake was not easy to change. Right above this place was probably the void where reincarnation mirror was. Unexpectedly, after 1,000 years, an ordinary village appeared in the originally lifeless area. After all, it was the place where the ancient treasure fell. The creatures here only needed to touch a little luck of reincarnation mirror, and it was enough to make a meteoric rise. Boy, there should be a lot of good seedlings of cultivation in this village. Take some back and give them to your sect to cultivate. Maybe there will be some outstanding people. The senior said. Fan Zisong couldn't help but chuckle. Senior, You are really clever. A few days ago, my junior fellow apprentice found 2 children with immortal latency from the village and took them into our sect. One of them has a complete spiritual root. Although the other only has 70% spiritual root, he is talented and intelligent. Maybe he can break through the realm of Zhuji realm and reach Jindan realm. The man in a gray robe couldn't help but laugh. The good seedlings he mentioned were not just ordinary spiritual roots. But he just said it casually and didn't bother to tell Fan Zisong in detail. During the communication of their psychic awareness, Fan Zisong walked back. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks and looked at the petite figure squatting by the riverside with a startled expression. Junior sister apprentice Su, why are you here? Hearing this, the old figure in the jade token shook violently in an instant. He almost couldn't maintain his figure and dissipated. The booming sound made Fan Zisong's head hurt. Chapter 345. Senior fellow apprentice, what's wrong with you? Su Li saw that Fan Zisong suddenly stood still after asking a question. A faint light flashed in her eyes. She sensed a pneuma that didn't belong to Fan Zisong at all, and seemed familiar. Senior, this Su Li is not the Su Li you know. Don't get me wrong. Fan Zisong couldn't care about the outside world at this moment. He transmitted his thoughts to the chaotic phantom in the jade token again and again. After struggling for a few breaths, the phantom finally returned to peace. Fan Zisong rubbed his temples and looked up at Su Li, who was looking at him curiously. He forced a gentle smile and said, Senior fellow apprentice, I'm fine. Why don't you sleep in the middle of the night and come here? Su Li shook her head and pointed to the low bungalow across the river. Fan Zisong suddenly realized that it should be the place where Su Li grew up, as Huang Dashan said. No wonder this girl appeared here. No matter what she had experienced there, it was the place where she was born after all. Do you want to have a look? Facing Fan Zisong's increasingly gentle question, Su Li nodded. She didn't want to go, but it was an excuse. After the blood practitioner's death, she wanted to come back to see if there were other fragments of reincarnation mirror in the Taishui River. It was convenient to go back to her hometown with Fan Zisong as a cover. There is no fragment falling in the Taishui River. The end of the river is the place where I picked up reincarnation mirror, so I don't need to go there. Perhaps, there is another guess that the ring of reincarnation mirror is recondensed from all the fragments in the Taishui River. The fragments in this river can condense into a mirror ring, plus the legend, is this Yunjing Lake. Thinking of this, Su Li raised her head and glanced at the empty sky. The bright moon hung high, like a mirror in a trance. Fan Zisong didn't notice this scene, but the old figure who had been paying attention to Su Li after waking up in the jade token was slightly shocked when he saw it. She really isn't. After a while, the two came to the dilapidated house on the east side of the river. 7 or 8 years had eroded the bungalow, with weeds and cobwebs everywhere. Su Li stood silently in front of the door and suddenly remembered the woman who gave birth to her. She should not have appeared in the world. Black Lotus Ring reversed her fate, which was equivalent to killing the woman's flesh and blood. She should be given some compensation. Senior brother, I don't want to watch anymore. Let's go back. Su Li suddenly said and turned away, leaving Fan Zisong who was at a loss. Why did the junior sister apprentice's mind become more and more difficult to understand after coming back? The next morning, Su Li found Fan Zisong. You want to leave? Then your grandfather. Su Li nodded, but did not say the reason. Fan Zisong glanced at Huang, who was still cooking breakfast in the earthen stove outside the door. He was slightly surprised. This girl's concept should not be divorced from the mortal world. She didn't miss Huang Dashan at all. After I reach the foundation establishment stage, I will come back to visit Grandpa. Su Li's childish voice was unusually calm and serious, but Fan Zisong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that he misunderstood the junior sister apprentice. Did this girl really think that cultivation was as simple as eating and drinking? When she reached the foundation establishment stage, Huang Dashan would have reincarnated several times. However, this kind of thing couldn't be explained clearly. When the girl entered the Lianqi realm, she would understand. Needless to say, he also found out the details of Taishui and didn't want to stay any longer. He couldn't help but nod and said, "After you two have breakfast, we will leave. Don't waste your grandfather's kindness." He saw that Huang Dashan went to the town early in the morning to buy white rice porridge and steamed bread. Su Li nodded slightly. "I'll say goodbye to Grandpa first." "Go ahead." Fan Zisong chuckled and didn't listen to what she said to Huang Dashan. No matter how strange this girl's character was, she was still a child, and her temperament was sincere. When she grew up, she would understand the friendship between the master and the disciple. Su Li came to the earthen stove and stood quietly. Huang Dashan heard the movement and straightened up. When he saw Su Li, he couldn't help but wonder, "Girl, I'm leaving." Su Li interrupted Huang Dashan and looked at him. "So fast?" Huang Dashan couldn't help but be shocked. It was too fast to leave in one night. He thought that Su Li could stay for at least 2 or 3 days. Su Li nodded and didn't explain much. Sensing that Fan Zisong's psychic awareness did not cover, she continued, "I will come back to you in less than a year. Take care of yourself this year. Stay in the village and practice peacefully. Don't go to other places." "A year?" Huang Dashan was stunned. Looking at Su Li's serious appearance, he suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Girl, you talk like a little adult. You should listen to your master in the sect and don't make trouble for your senior fellow apprentice. It's not good to always think about an old guy like me." Su Li frowned and said, "What I said is true." Okay, I believe you. I will never leave the village this year." Seeing that Su Li seemed to be angry, Huang couldn't help but laugh and comfort her. "Well, I can't force you." Su Li relaxed her eyebrows. She had said what she should say. If Huang Dashan really left Tieha village at that time and she couldn't find him, it was also his fate. She turned back to the house. Huang couldn't help but look gloomy and fell into thought. He suddenly woke up after Fan Zisong left with Su Li and Fan Zisong after breakfast. The words just now were really not like what a 14 or 15-year-old child would say. Even if someone taught her, the tone couldn't be taught. He remembered that Su Li would more or less behave differently from ordinary children over the years. He thought it was just because Su Li had a miserable childhood and matured a little earlier. But now it seemed that it was not so. Huang Dashan's heart was heavy. Maybe he should really look forward to the meeting with Su Li a year later. Jincheng dynasty was one of the few imperial dynasties of cultivation in the secular world of Zhouzhou region. Of course, compared with the sects in the cultivation circle, the imperial cultivation was just like playing house. The highest cultivation was only the peak of Zhuji realm, and the means were simple. If they were enemies with Fan Zisong who came from a sect, they might not even be able to resist one move. This was also the reason why Fan Zisong dared to come to the imperial court with Su Li and Fan Zisong. "Here we are. Senior fellow apprentice, it's there." Ji Ning pointed to the very eye-catching golden palaces below and shouted excitedly. Fan Zisong responded and landed, but he thought that this was the reaction that ordinary children should have when they returned to their hometown. He remembered that Su Li didn't even move her eyebrows when she returned to her hometown a few days ago. In order not to cause trouble, Fan Zisong landed in the mountain forest not far from the imperial city, and then took Su Li and Fan Zisong to the gate of the imperial city on foot. During this period, he did not forget to tell them, "Junior sister apprentice Jean, although you know the real name of junior sister apprentice, you can't say it in front of outsiders. Do you understand? Junior sister apprentice, you should always keep it in mind." Ji Ning nodded repeatedly and said in a crisp voice, "Senior fellow apprentice, I will keep it in mind." Su Li nodded silently. She knew the danger of exposure better than anyone else. In the blink of an eye, the three entered the city. There were endless pedestrians on the busy streets, and the noise made the three who hadn't seen the bustle for a long time feel that it was a lifetime ago. Junior sister apprentice has never been to a big city, right? Senior fellow apprentice, I want to take junior sister apprentice to go shopping and buy some beautiful clothes. It can be regarded as a good host. Jining, who returned to her hometown, was obviously much more at ease. After getting Fan Zisang's approval, she immediately took Su Li into a luxury clothing shop, and kept talking. Fan Zisang had a smile at the corner of his mouth, following behind her. It was nice to have a moment of leisure before entering the secret realm of shattered spirits. After a short stroll, Fan Zisang, who was leaning on a wooden pillar, suddenly sensed something and looked at the door. As expected, he saw a burly leader rushing in with the Imperial Guards, which immediately caused a small disturbance. In the blink of an eye, the burly leader was in front of him. When he was about to surpass him and step into the shop where the two junior sister apprentices were, Fan Zisang stood in front of the leader and said lightly, "Why are you here?" Seeing his extraordinary temperament, the burly leader slightly restrained his arrogance, but his tone was still impatient. He said in a deep voice, "The Imperial Guards of the Imperial Palace are on business. Irrelevant people, get out of the way." Fan Zisang raised his eyebrows, but he didn't get angry. He just said, "My two junior sister apprentices are trying clothes inside. You can't go in before they come out. How dare you?" The burly leader suddenly became angry and was about to take action. Fan Zisang looked slightly cold, but at this moment, Jin Ying's voice suddenly came, "Is it Commander Wang?" The two people who were about to take action were stunned and turned to look at the shop. They saw Jin Ying in a bright goose yellow palace dress coming out. Behind her was Su Li in a black dress. Her waterfall-like long hair fluttered casually behind her, with a red hair ornament on her head. Coupled with her white and delicate face, she was like a night elf, exuding an ethereal atmosphere. Fan Zisang's eyes flashed a trace of amazement. His junior sister apprentice was as beautiful as a fairy. She was so outstanding just by dressing up a little. The burly leader on the side didn't notice Su Li. After seeing Jining, he became relaxed and stepped forward quickly, saying anxiously, 14th Princess, why are you here? Didn't you follow 13th Prince to Huajian sect?" Jining suddenly smiled sweetly and looked at Fan Zisang, who had recovered his gentle look. "Senior fellow apprentice brought me back." "Senior fellow apprentice?" The burly leader was immediately stunned. Then he reacted and looked back to see Fan Zisang with a calm face. Dense cold sweat immediately broke out on his forehead, and he asked cautiously, "Senior, are you an outstanding disciple of Huajian sect?" After seeing Fan Zisang nod, the burly leader's face became paler. His attitude towards this senior just now was not friendly at all. "Since you are ignorant and close to my junior sister apprentice, I won't blame you." Chapter 346. The Imperial Palace. Commander Wang's face changed slightly. After a moment of hesitation, he dismissed the Imperial Guards behind him. One stayed and said in a low voice, "Senior, 14th Princess, you'd better not go to the Imperial Palace now." Fan Zisang frowned, and Jining was even more puzzled. She asked aloud, "Why?" Commander Wang sighed, "This is not a good place to talk. Senior and Princess, please move. Let's talk in another place." "Well, let's go to the restaurant over there." Fan Zisang nodded and pointed to the 3-story building not far away. Then he pulled Su Li and Jining to move forward. Commander Wang noticed that there was a younger girl beside Fan Zisang besides Princess Royal Highness. In terms of appearance, she was even more beautiful than Princess Royal Highness. However, he was worried and didn't pay much attention to Su Li. After a while, the four of them sat down in the elegant room of the restaurant. Commander Wang ordered the waiter to bring tea. After organizing his words, he finally said, "Princess Royal Highness, shortly after you and 13th Prince left, the Imperial Palace was in chaos. The emperor failed to break through in the deep imperial palace and was seriously injured by the backfire. Although the news was immediately suppressed by the empress, I don't know who spread it, but everyone in the imperial palace knows it. The obedient princes are all ready to make trouble, and the imperial harem is even more chaotic. Every day, many spies sneak in to find out the location of the emperor's retreat. It is impossible to prevent it. And many little princesses and princes in the imperial palace have been killed. Not long ago, I received the news that someone saw you in the clothing shop. I thought someone pretended to be you, but I didn't expect it to be true. At this critical moment, Princess Royal Highness, you must not go back. Fan Zisong nodded gently. With his divine awareness, he could naturally see that Commander Wang's words were sincere without any falsehood. It was just a turmoil in the imperial palace. If he took action to calm it down, it would be easy. But, he turned his eyes and fell on Jining. What about my imperial mother? Did she get hurt? Jin Ying's face was a little pale. She tightly grasped the edge of the tablecloth and stared at Commander Wang and asked. Commander Wang smiled bitterly. He had a close relationship with Consort Ling and had expected that the 14th princess would ask this question. But it was useless to lie now, so he could only tell the truth. A few days ago, the bedchamber where Consort Ling lived was smashed into pieces. Fortunately, Consort Ling had some cultivation foundation and escaped quickly without being crushed to death. However, she was hit in the chest by the thief and has not woken up yet. What? Jining immediately stood up and looked at Fan Zisong for help. Senior fellow apprentice, I'm going to the imperial palace. Fan Zisong smiled slightly, touched Jin Ying's head, and said, go if you want to. Don't be afraid. I am with you. Maybe I can cure your mother's injury. Hearing this, Jining immediately burst into laughter. She was surprised and happy. Yes, I still have my senior fellow apprentice. He is the disciple of the Mount Head, so he must have great magical power. It is not difficult for him to cure my mother. General Wang, let's go to the palace. Commander Wang nodded repeatedly and got up to lead the way. He was shocked. He had heard what Jining said just now. This young man turned out to be the disciple of the Mount Head of Huajian sect. Wouldn't the 14th princess, thinking of the difficult situation of Consort Ling in these years, Commander Wang breathed a long sigh of relief. Consort Ling finally had a bright future. Su Li followed Fan Zisong silently. Her eyes were gloomy. Since she met Commander Wang, she didn't say a word. She just looked at him quietly. In her field of vision, Commander Wang was surrounded by a faint layer of black air. Although it was not obvious, it could be seen clearly with a little attention. She had been observing Fan Zisong's reaction just now, but found that he looked as usual and didn't notice it. Only I can see it. With this conclusion, Su Li became more and more thoughtful. Was it the Black Lotus ring or the body of evil ghost? Apart from these two things, she really couldn't think of any ability to surpass Fan Zisong at present. Tan Tai Feng once said that every ghost clan would stimulate a unique talent ability. Although there are many kinds, each of them is very powerful. The body of evil ghost is a taboo of the ghost clan, so it must also have a talent ability. Is this my talent? She frowned slightly, but what did the black air represent? Black Lotus ring didn't respond, and no one could tell her. She could only explore by herself. Under the escort of the Imperial Guards, they passed through the long palace gate and came to the rather deserted front hall square. Commander Wang led them to the harem without stopping. Along the way, they could hardly see the figures of the palace maids and eunuchs. Instead, they saw many piles of yellow leaves dancing in the wind on the ground. It was a desolate scene everywhere. Fan Zisong couldn't help but narrow his eyes slightly. The situation in the palace seemed to be more serious than he thought. But at this moment, Commander Wang stopped in front of an old palace with a very small area and mottled walls. He said, "Here we are. Consort Ling is temporarily placed here." Jining was stunned and exclaimed, "Isn't this the cold palace? Commander Wang." Commander Wang sighed again and didn't speak. He just let everyone in. Jining was the first to rush to the front and open the door. At a glance, she saw the old palace maid squatting beside the medicine stove in the yard. The old palace maid heard the sound and looked up. When she saw Jining, she was immediately surprised and happy. "Your Highness, you are back." After saying that, the old palace maid remembered something and her face changed immediately. "Your Highness, aren't you?" When she thought of the scene that Her Highness was asked by 13th Prince to be a concubine to go to the immortal sect with him a few months ago, she couldn't help feeling a little humiliated. Was it possible that 13th Prince was tired of playing with her in such a short time? "Mammy Hui, it's not what you think." Jin Ying's explanation made Mammy Hui stunned. Commander Wang, who was anxious, couldn't help interrupting, "I will explain it to you later. The urgent thing is to see Consort Ling first. This is a disciple from the immortal sect. He must have a way to cure Consort Ling." Hearing this, Mammy Hui was overjoyed. She quickly got up and saluted to Fan Zisong, "Your Excellency, please take care of my Consort Ling." Fan Zisong didn't say anything but just smiled slightly. "Lead the way." "Okay, okay." Mammy Hui opened the door of the side hall, and a group of people filed in. Su Li stepped into the door and saw the dim picture in the room. She couldn't help but stop. Fan Zisong, who sensed this change, was also stunned and asked softly, "What's wrong?" He saw that this girl's eyebrows had not loosened all the way. Su Li shook her head and didn't speak. Even if she said it, Fan Zisong wouldn't believe it. The room was full of visible black air, and the deeper it was, the thicker it was. The moment she stepped into the room, she could feel that there was a natural power in her body suddenly trembling. Fan Zisong didn't know why, but it was not the time to explore. He took Su Li and continued to walk inside. Soon they came to the bedside. A pale but beautiful woman was lying quietly, with her chest rising and falling slightly. "Mother!" Jin Ying's eyes turned red in an instant. She was about to rush to the bedside, but found that Fan Zisong didn't let go of her hand. She couldn't help but look up in astonishment. "Senior fellow apprentice?" Fan Zisong frowned tightly. The woman in front of him gave him a very bad feeling, just like the demon he once met in that place. Her breath was strange and made him feel uncomfortable, as if he was stared at by something ominous. He suddenly remembered that Su Li paused before entering the room. Could it be that the junior sister apprentice had already noticed it at that time? Fan Zisong looked down in surprise and found that Su Li was looking at the woman with a dignified gaze. To be precise, she was looking at the woman's shoulder. Dignified? How could a 14-year-old girl have such a gaze? Fan Zisong was surprised and doubtful. When he looked at Su Li again, he found that she was ignorant. Her eyes were clear but full of confusion, as if everything he had seen before was an illusion. Could it be that this strange feeling is making me hallucinate? Fan Zisong was slightly shocked and immediately let go of them. He made a gesture and shouted softly, "There is spirit in heaven and earth. All things gather." As soon as he finished speaking, a light blue circular boundary immediately enveloped everyone in the room, including Consort Ling, who was lying on the bed. In Su Li's vision, she immediately saw that the inky black air was pushed away by the boundary. But in the blink of an eye, the black air seemed to be boiling and crazily drilled into the boundary. Its direction was Consort Ling's shoulder. "No!" Sensing the crazy strange breath, Fan Zisong's face turned as pale as paper in the blink of an eye. He immediately sat cross-legged and madly made gestures to resist the black air that wanted to drill into the boundary. Since he had promised his junior sister apprentice, he must not break his promise. No matter whether he could save Consort Ling or not, he had to try. "What's the matter? Senior fellow apprentice, what's wrong with you?" Fan Zisong didn't have time to explain. Jining didn't understand the situation and suddenly panicked. Commander Wang and Mammy Hui were also at a loss. At their level, they couldn't touch the real cultivation at all, let alone the means of practitioners in Zhuji realm. Senior fellow apprentice. Looking at Fan Zisong, who closed his eyes, Jining was about to go up and pull his sleeve. But at this moment, a hand stopped in front of her. He can't be distracted now. You take Commander Wang and Mammy Hui to leave first. Hearing this extremely calm voice, Jining immediately calmed down and saw clearly that it was Su Li who stopped her in front of her. Junior sister apprentice Su, you must have a way, right? Jin Ying's eyes suddenly lit up. She knew that Su Li had some unknown secrets. Commander Wang and Mammy Hui were indeed hesitant. This girl looked younger than Her Highness, and Her Highness called her junior sister apprentice. Obviously, she entered the sect later than Her Highness. How could she have a way? Was Her Highness confused because of anxiety? Your Highness, the urgent matter is, Commander Wang opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by a cold voice before he finished speaking, hurry up. Su Li's face was a little gloomy. She had to take action. Otherwise, when Fan Zisong couldn't bear the serious injury, she would lose a power that temporarily protected her, and the possibility of exposure would be greater. Chapter 347. Jining was shocked and immediately woke up. Instead of being angry, she was happy. There was a voice in her heart telling her that this was the real junior sister apprentice Su. I'm leaving now. Commander Wang, Mammy Hui, come with me. Commander Wang and Mammy Hui both looked strange. Commander Wang, who was straightforward, was quite angry. He glanced at Su Li and said bluntly, Your Highness, why do you listen to your junior sister apprentice? Instead of listening to the nonsense of a girl younger than you, we'd better find a way by ourselves. Yes, Your Highness, the immortal senior is trapped. This matter is critical. Don't take it lightly. The two chattered on one side. Jining saw Su Li's impatient look on her face. Somehow, she thought of the black-robed man who knocked her out in her dream that day. She felt a chill in her heart and showed Her Majesty as a member of the palace for the first time. I'm the master. You all go out with me. Commander Wang and Mammy Hui were confused. Then they remembered their identity. How could they disobey the orders of the royal family members? Your Highness, alas, Commander Wang sighed. Looking at Jin Ying's firm face, he knew that it was useless to say anything. He could only go out with Mammy Hui. After driving the two away, Jining stayed in the same place and said with pleading eyes, Junior sister apprentice Su, can I stay? I know that day was not a dream at all. The man was not a good person at first glance. But in the end, both of us are alive. Although I am young, I am not stupid. I'll help you keep this a secret. I'll never tell anyone else. Su Li glanced at her and said lightly, if you want to stay, you can stay. But no matter what you see, you can only stand there. If you move, you know the consequences. Anyway, after she broke through Zhuji realm, she would definitely erase some of Jin Ying's memories. It didn't matter if she saw it now. Really? Jining was pleasantly surprised. When she saw Su Li's faint gaze, she immediately covered her mouth and dared not to make a sound. Even her breathing slowed down a lot, but she still couldn't hide the joy in her eyes. She just took a chance and didn't expect that Su Li really agreed. Ignoring the existence of Jining, Su Li's eyes returned to Consort Ling. After pondering for a moment, she walked over. In Jin Ying's puzzled eyes, she gently put her palm on the shoulder without any wound. In the next moment, an extremely huge suction came from Su Li's palm. Concubine Ling, who was in a coma, groaned, and a blood sword came out directly from her shoulder and fell into Su Li's hand. Su Li glanced at the black air that changed its direction and became more and more turbulent. The light blue boundary was covered with dense fragments. Su Li no longer hesitated and immediately walked out of the boundary with the blood-stained thing in her hand. Boom! Countless wisps of black gas seemed to have found a source to vent their anger on. They frantically surged into the blood-stained object, washing away the blood and revealing the true nature of the object. It was a black pearl, sparkling and translucent, emitting a gem-like radiance. What on earth is the source of the black gas? Suli glanced at the black gas that was completely absorbed inside and outside the room, and then looked at Fan Zisong, who was still meditating and recovering. She immediately stopped suppressing the power in her body. Then she felt a wonderful touch extending from her body to her palm. In the blink of an eye, the black pearl turned into a pile of stone powder. After swallowing up the black gas inside, it shrank back. A thought of hungry was transmitted to Suli's awareness. See? Hungry. That power was crying out for food. Could it be that this black gas was her food? Suli had a headache thinking about it. If she could find some records about the body of evil ghost, she wouldn't be so ignorant. However, it was impossible for a small sect like Huajian sect to have the record of the body of evil ghost. Even Yushu's sect. She didn't see the description about it in the sect's classics. If she wanted to get the news, she might have to rely on luck. Who? There was a sound of relief behind her. It was Fan Zisong who woke up. Suli waved her hand to disperse the stone powder and glanced at Jining, who was still in a daze. Jining immediately woke up and thought about how to explain it to Fan Zisong. She was confused. From her point of view, Suli just drew out a pearl from her mother's body, and then crushed it. Then there was nothing left. However, even senior fellow apprentice couldn't solve the crisis, but Suli could solve it casually. From this point of view, many things could be seen. Although I don't know why the powerful fluctuation disappeared, I survived it. Fan Zisong opened his eyes, and a trace of fear flashed across his face. After seeing that Suli and Jining were safe and sound, he felt at ease. When he released his awareness, he was surprised to find that there was no strange feeling in the whole room. What happened during this period? Fan Zisong was a little confused. But looking at the two girls who were at a loss, he could only smile bitterly. It seemed that no one could answer for him. Where are Commander Wang and others? Jining quickly said, they just went out to find a way. I'll call them over. Then she ran out quickly without waiting for Fan Zisong's response. Seeing this, Suli relaxed a little. At least for now, it seemed that Jining would firmly keep the secret for her. Not long after, Commander Wang and Mammy Hui entered the room together. Since they had been instructed, they naturally wouldn't show any difference to Suli, but they were inevitably shocked. They had all misjudged her before. It was not Fan Zisong who was really powerful, but this young girl. Not long after. Fan Zisong sat by the bed, withdrew his psychic awareness, and said with a smile, it's just some internal injuries that are not serious. I will nurse her with spiritual power, and she will wake up at night. He felt strange in his heart. As long as she took medicine on time, she would wake up in a few days. It was impossible for it to take so long. He still thought that Consort Ling's coma had something to do with the vision just now. But the vision was obviously terrible. Why did it suddenly disappear when she was about to be seriously injured? Jining and others didn't know Fan Zisong's distress at the moment, and they all looked happy. Great! Senior fellow apprentice, thank you so much. Fan Zisong smiled bitterly in his heart. He knew that he couldn't explain it, so he could only nod and let it go. In the evening, Consort Ling woke up as expected. She was naturally happy to see her daughter coming back, and her pale face immediately looked much better. After thanking him, Consort Ling gradually looked worried. She turned her head and asked, Commander Wang, do you know where His Majesty is practicing in isolation? Commander Wang shook his head quickly and said with a bitter smile, if I knew, how could I still stand here leisurely? I'm afraid I would have been caught and tortured by Lord Ning and others. Consort Ling looked disappointed, but she also knew that what Commander Wang said was the truth. How about the Empress now? The Empress? Mammy Hui snorted when she heard the words. she is not as affectionate as you. She moved out the second day after you were seriously injured, and I also heard that she had contact with Lord Ning secretly. What? Consort Ling was stunned, and her face turned gloomy. She asked, Where? Where did you hear this? Mammy Hui suddenly became speechless and regretted that she couldn't control her mouth. If it was known by the Empress, she and Consort Ling couldn't escape. But now that she said it, she could only continue to grit her teeth and said, The embroidery maid of the embroidery building told me before she left. She saw with her own eyes that Lord Ning and the Empress talked happily together, and it was after the Emperor was seriously injured in isolation. Hearing this, Su Li almost figured it out. It was nothing more than the Empress and Lord Ning joining hands to seize power. Maybe the so-called serious injury was caused by these two. Thinking of this, she quietly spread out her divine awareness. Fan Zisong just tried to find the place where the Emperor practiced in isolation, but it didn't mean that she couldn't. Soon the information was fed back from the psychic awareness. After absorbing it, Su Li was stunned. It was not that she didn't find it, but there were 3 places in the Imperial Palace, all of which were covered by hidden tactical matrices. One of them is the place where the Jincheng Emperor practiced in isolation, and the other 2, Su Li's eyes soon brightened, and she thought of something. The treasury of the Jincheng dynasty. There must be a large number of spiritual stones and even treasures for practice in the treasury. If she could get them, she could recover to Zhuji realm in a short time. It's not difficult to break the tactical matrix, but how to send Fan Zisong away? Su Li habitually touched her ring finger. She was still too weak now, and she couldn't even fly on the sword. She had no ability to protect herself at all. It was really unwise to expose her extraordinariness in advance. When Su Li was thinking hard to no avail, Fan Zisong had finished the discussion. The tactical matrix is very hidden. I can't detect it, and Lord Ning naturally can't find it. Please rest assured, Consort Ling. For the sake of my junior sister apprentice, I will spend 3 days to explore the Imperial Palace inch by inch. Maybe I can sense it when the distance is close. Hearing that Fan Zisong was willing to help, Consort Ling was immediately surprised and said repeatedly, Senior Fan, I will never forget your kindness. Fan Zisong smiled and gladly accepted her thanks. Then he took out 5 talismans and gave them to everyone, saying, If you encounter danger after I leave, you can activate this talisman. I will sense it and come back in the time when the talisman is activated. After giving everyone the means to protect themselves, Fan Zisong didn't stay any longer and turned to leave. The secret realm of shattered spirits was about to open. It would be a sin if he delayed in the Jincheng dynasty. Sensing that Fan Zisong's pneuma went away quickly, Su Li secretly said that she was lucky. Fan Zisong's departure saved her a lot of time. She looked back at Jining deeply, and then left without saying anything. In the blink of an eye, her petite figure disappeared outside the door. Consort Ling was stunned. Is that your junior sister apprentice? How? Jining looked a little complicated, and she couldn't tell what she felt in her heart. She said, Mother, junior sister apprentice Su is not an ordinary person. Don't ask so much, and don't tell senior fellow apprentice about it. Hearing this, Consort Ling became more and more surprised. After a while, she sighed deeply, you have grown up. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.